Chapter 1081, Return in Fulfillment I. He departed the island amid the respectful farewells of the Kui family members. Kui Juyin stood upon the heavenly light, faintly sorrowful, yet Li Ziming had no time for him. He kept reading and rereading Reversal 100 Formations Battleground Body, gaining a deeper understanding of the secret technique. It was as if a fragment had been taken from Reversal, with 8 out of 10 words omitted. Though incomplete, it resonates with the scripture of the body guarding Tiger Pass and can still be cultivated, albeit with difficulty. If another immortal foundation is used, applying it to the heaven-venerating gate will most likely fail. In his heart, he had already calculated, Reversal 100 Formations Battleground Body cannot be applied to the heaven-venerating gate, but my family's reversal likely works with every immortal foundation. With these 9 secret techniques in hand, Bright Yang alone grants 9 different paths to cultivate any art. Even the imperial families of old would have no more than this. Feeling awkward for having once complained about the secret techniques being too simplistic, he smiled wryly. He withdrew a jade slip from his robe, his expression solemn as though pondering a profound divine move. Kui Juyin dared not speak, wondering, what is this supposed to be? The jade slip recorded Li Ziming's comprehension of the Yang origin secret technique, which was nearly 100,000 words. Compared to before, it was no longer grinding grain or boiling pastries. It had reached the point of teaching one how to swallow without choking. Now, reading it again, he felt ashamed, cursing himself inwardly. My family's Dao lineage was incomplete in those years. My cultivation in Bright Yang was scarcely superior to that of rogue cultivators. If this secret technique were placed within the family, I wouldn't have dared sign my name. Future generations would see it and wonder how Zheajing, the Li family's first Taoist master, could write 100,000 words of foolish repetition. He wanted to throw it away, yet felt like it would be a pity. So he scribbled the pseudonym Taoist Master Gufeng at the signature line before tucking it back into his sleeve. When he saw Li Ziming's newly composed expression, as if he had resolved upon something, Kui Juyin sighed inwardly. How unfathomable are the thoughts of a Taoist master. My family's aid must have given him greater confidence. With this small interlude over, Li Ziming finally began pondering the origins of the Radiant Essence scripture. 9 secret techniques, yet only a 5th grade spell. The bestowed law of the immortal mirror. Where did it truly come from? The Radiant Essence scripture had been bestowed upon Li Xiaowei, the Li family's white Qilin born once in 100 years with extraordinary destiny. The 9 secret techniques were clearly due to him, yet the scripture itself was only of the 5th grade. Judging from the examples of Jiangqian and Qiwen, cultivation arts and secret techniques seem to be granted separately. Mingwang's fate is different, thus he received an extreme number of 9 secret techniques. He continued to speculate as he flew back. The waves upon the sea grew fiercer, schools of fish darted across the surface, and when a few demonic creatures leapt forth, they were grazed by the heavenly light beneath his feet and instantly reduced to ash. Li Ziming was no longer the same as before. The heavenly light between his brows fluctuated, connecting with the great void. He quietly sensed the transformation of spiritual energy and began calculating. The farther to the southeast, the more violent the transformation of spiritual energy becomes. Falling water rising storm is a matter for true monarchs. Meddling will only bring calamity. Even if one has cultivated divine abilities, not every place is fit to enter. He roughly gauged the direction, which seemed to be near Shiki Island. The eastern sea belonged to the dragon clans, so he had no intention of wandering around without certainty. He rode the wind back, heading inland toward Moongaze Lake. Still, the spring at Shiki has some marvel to it. Once matters are settled, I might take a stroll there. The great void surged and rippled in every direction. It was Kui Juyin's first time seeing the legendary Great Void, and he observed it with great curiosity. Now that he had gained a capable subordinate and restored his Dao direction, Li Ziming was in excellent spirits. Wasting no time, he drew out Changxi's divine technique of pavilion view, refining within fire, and began to read. Just by hearing the name divine technique of pavilion view, refining within fire, it was clear that it was not the work of contemporary cultivators. Its incantation-like, perception-driven naming style resembled the 6 chapters seeking immortality his family elders had once obtained from Green Pine Grotto Heaven. It was very likely a relic from that same era. Li Ziming flipped through the text. Most of it described profound and wondrous methods such as sacrificial altars, various spirit items, radiant fire, baleful qi, and groups of cultivators assisting in refining and gradually tempering the embryo over many years. Looking closely, he found that the cultivators of that time were described as their Kihai flickers with light, not yet Shenyang, possessing some wonders but falling short of divine abilities. These were merely Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. Yet the ancients spoke with such a grandiose tone. Li Ziming grumbled inwardly. From the looks of it, 12 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators were required, alternating in groups of 6. Moreover, their immortal foundations could not conflict with the spirit embryo. For instance, if refining a bright Yang Dharma artifact, one could not use veiled yin or radiant essence, and it was best to avoid pit water of the water virtue. Fortunately, my family does not practice those two Taos. Pausing for a moment, Li Ziming contemplated the mention of pit water. That was the only possible conflict, for his family had quite a few pit water cultivation techniques, all of which he had practiced. Logically, bright yang and pit water should not have a restraining relationship. With his current Tao attainments, he secretly speculated, radiant fire and bright yang follow the same path, while radiant fire and pit water oppose one another. That is likely the reason. Casting aside the thought, he turned his mind to selecting a spirit embryo. He had a few Foundation Establishment Realm Dharma artifacts in his possession. The Sunseeker ring was difficult to handle. It bore the inscribed names of Green Pine Temple cultivators, and thus could not be used. Aside from a few useless ones, only the Chang'eming Profound Insight Screen, Yang Radiant Red Sparrow Banner, and Profound Pattern Bottle were fit to serve as spirit embryos. The Chang'eming Profound Insight Screen was enigmatic and almost certainly aligned with the Tao of Supreme Yang. It was one of the family's few Dharma artifacts confirmed to be from ancient techniques. Li Ziming deemed it extraordinary and had always cherished it. It also surely contained hidden mysteries. The other ancient Dharma artifact was the Profound Patterned Bottle. Though it lacked overwhelming might, it was prized by the Li family for its marvelous versatility. Aside from the Profound Patterned Bottle, they had never seen a Dharma artifact that transformed in harmony with its master's changes. Its ingenuity seemed without limit, and was a testament to the ancient's superb craftsmanship. Since the Profound Patterned Bottle is a relic of the Wei's Li lineage, it is very likely suitable as a bright Yang Dharma artifact. It is worth trying. Even if this set of Dharma artifacts fails, I can still turn to the Azure Pond Sect's Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, who have entered Dongli Grotto Heaven, and trade for a top-grade bright Yang Dharma artifact. That is not difficult. Chapter 1082, Return and Fulfillment, II. Within the Mirror's world, Supreme Yin surged within the profound hall of the Palace of Radiant Purity Supreme Yin. Patterns of golden stamen laurel adorned the place, while moonlit lamps shone on mounds of snow piled high. Images of jade rabbits and toads could be seen everywhere. A few snowflakes drifted through the air as a man with folded sleeves walked out from within the palace. The youth had a broad forehead, as well as thick hair and whiskers that flowed down his cheeks. His face was pale, and his eyes were a light jade green. Waves were painted on his sleeves. He turned into the courtyard and sat down next to someone there and spoke. "Lord Liu, do you have any connection with the lower realm? When will Lord Li return?" The other was an immortal official in white. The immortal official only shook his head repeatedly and replied, "Time passes and years are unknown in the lower realm. If he has gone to cultivate the Tao, it could be hundreds or thousands of years. There is no reason for it to be so soon. Alas, hundreds or thousands of years. That will wear me to death." Sorrow welled up in the youth's heart, and he sat there in a daze. This youth was none other than Dangjiang. He had been compiling spell arts here for who knew how long, studying day and night without rest and writing, until his mouth went dry. Jade slips continued to pour out endlessly from the cabinets. Dangjiang had never been diligent by nature, and compiling spell arts was exhausting work, yet he had no reprieve day or night. At last, when he managed to rest and asked immortal official Li for news, it felt like a crushing blow. He sat dazed for a time, with no mind to admire the drifting snow in the palace. Suddenly, immortal official Liu shot to his feet and saluted respectfully. "Greetings, my lord." Dangjiang quickly raised his head and saw a cold-faced immortal general clad in silver armor at the edge of the courtyard. His cheeks were as sharp as if they were cut by a blade. The youth immediately stood and sighed deeply. "Greetings, immortal general." This was none other than Zhenggao, the Supreme Yin Bright Immortal General. Zhenggao had left him in this desolate place, forced to toil ever since Dangjiang had arrived. Worse still, there were few people here, each elusive and silent, hardly speaking at all. There was no way to even find Zhenggao. Dangjiang had long been stifled with frustration. Now that he finally found his superior, he could not contain his excitement and exclaimed with emotion, "It has been so long since I last saw you, my lord." Zhenggao replied coolly, a single trip to the lower realm cannot be considered long. Other than Dangjiang, everything in this mirror's world was an illusion. Zhenggao, of course, was under Lu Jiangxian's casual control. Even immortal official Liu beside him was no different. The reason he spoke so little was simply because Lu Jiangxian found it tiresome to deal with such a chatterbox. Li Ziming had visited several places in succession on this breakthrough journey, including the Azure Pond Sect, Xianyu Peak, Sword Gate, then Xuanmiao Temple, Profound Peak Gate, and finally the Cui family's Changzhou Island. Lu Jiangxian had not paid constant attention, yet the immortal mirror's illumination had followed his journey from within the great void. Every spell, art, and secret technique that could be taken had been gathered. However, each sect had sealed them with restrictive methods that were difficult to unravel. The harvest could only be considered moderate. Every spell at Changzhou Island, Sword Gate, and the Azure Pond sect had a unique restrictive method. The unlocking methods for higher-grade spell arts appeared to be transmitted orally within each lineage and were not recorded in jade slips, so the harvest there was meager. As for Xiao shooting, the old fox of Xianyu Peak, every single cultivation technique was bound by restrictions. Nothing whatsoever could be gained from that vast peak. Only Xuanmiao Temple and Profound Peak Gate had shallow foundations and no illustrious background. The restrictive methods for their cultivation arts were recorded directly in jade slips. Profound Peak Gate was better protected, with most Purple Mansion realm secret techniques kept inside Changxi's storage pouch, though the rest lay open. Xuanmiao Temple, which had only been established in Jiangbei for barely over a decade, lacked proper structure. The unlocking methods for its Purple Mansion realm techniques were placed right behind the statue of their ancestor true monarch Su Xiang, and thus were seized all at once. Most of what he had gained were Foundation Establishment realm spell arts. The Sword Gate had quite a number of 3rd and 4th grade sword techniques. Xuanmiao Temple actually yielded the least, yet they had a 5th grade Purple Mansion technique, the Scripture of Precious White Earth, a rare path of treasure earth. These were all gains within expectation. Yet as Li Ziming passed through the Eastern Sea, Lu Jiangxian inadvertently came across a cave dwelling that seemed to belong to an ancient cultivator. The cave's formation was flawless. It was imperceptible even if it had been placed directly before Li Ziming. Lu Jiangxian had no intention of wasting effort. His divine sense passed through the formation and surveyed the space inside. Though spacious, it held nothing particularly notable. He merely read the formation plate and casually memorized it. All the other arts were poured into the Mountain Sutra repository and left unused. Their sect-specific traits were too distinct. Without alteration by Dangjiang or himself, they could not be applied directly, only studied for reference. He now entertained a new thought. The repository was already overflowing with spell arts that Dangjiang had tediously revised day by day, and bestowing them one by one to the Li family seemed too inefficient. Perhaps he could rely on the connections among talisman seeds and let the Li family members choose for themselves. If so, someone needed to oversee and guide the repository. That way, if more things were revealed to the Li family in the future, it would be all the more convenient. If there was a means of contact, he can fabricate a reason to bestow something like the cave residence, rather than let it waste away in the sea. After all, work was work for Dangjiang, no matter where it was done. If he were not confined to this palace, Lu Jiangxian would not have to constantly shape incarnations to deal with him. He had no intention of meeting the Li family directly, so he planned ahead. Thus, inhabiting the body of Zhenggao, he walked over to Dangjiang and said with a nod, "Though I made a trip to the lower realm, I heard from immortal official Liu that you have been diligent and tireless. I also reviewed the techniques you revised. Most were useful, and though some were rejected, it is clear you put in earnest effort. This, I thank you for your understanding, my lord," replied an overjoyed Dangjiang. He cast a grateful glance at immortal official. Zhenggao continued, "Since you are so diligent and capable, I shall arrange a position for you in heaven. What do you think?" Had not Dangjiang been toiling so earnestly precisely for this moment, he bowed delightedly, "My lord's grace engraves gratitude into my very being." Before he could finish, Zhenggao raised his hand and said, "I asked the registrar and found a pavilion at Heaven's Edge for you. Manpower in heaven is scarce, and that pavilion has long been abandoned. It was originally the official post of immortal official. When he returns from the lower realm, he will certainly receive a good position, leaving this one vacant. Since you are adept in Taoist arts, you shall first be dispatched there to manage spells and techniques. For now, you will stand guard in his stead." What? When he heard it was still the same exhausting task, Dang Zhang nearly blurted out in protest. Inwardly he lamented, "What do you mean by adept in Taoist arts? Do I have any other choice? Even if they sent me to meet people, patrol a pavilion, stand watch in heaven, or go to the lower realm to slay demons, it would all be fine. Why is it always about being adept in Taoist arts again?" Lu Jiangxian knew he was a talkative type, and never one to quietly sit and revise techniques. Yet now where in heaven was there to patrol, and what demons were left to slay? So he only asked suspiciously, "Do you dislike the post for being too lowly?" With those words, the matter was sealed. Dang Zhang dared not argue, shaking his head repeatedly and voicing words of gratitude. Lu Jiangxian found it amusing and, through Zhenggao, turned to say, "Gather your things, I'll take you to the edge of heaven." When Zhenggao stepped out of the courtyard, immortal official Liu finally dropped his stiff, reverent demeanor, coming to life as he cupped his hands in congratulations. "Congratulations, congratulations." Dang Zhang was torn between joy and worry. He was glad to finally have a position in heaven, yet troubled that it meant continuing the same exhausting work, perhaps with an even greater workload. Lu Jiangxian borrowed the rhetoric of his previous life and consoled him through immortal official Liu. "Having this post is already a good thing. You're now a fellow colleague. Which of the immortal officials did not start this way? Do the work steadily, endure until the clouds part and the bright moon appears." Dang Zhang ground his teeth and replied, "When I finally rise and gain the chance to descend to the lower realm, I must have a proper talk with fellow Taoist Li. This is work that lasts for centuries." Chapter 1083, The Secret of Essence Gathering Pill I. Li Ziming broke through the great void above Zhaijing Mountain, descended, and sent someone to summon Li Xiaowei. He took a seat at the table, while Cui Juyan did not dare sit and instead stood respectfully at his side. He asked Cui Juyan about matters concerning the Outer Sea. After only a few exchanges, while Cui Juyan was answering respectfully, he noticed someone coming up from the mountain below. The newcomer was tall and well-built, strong yet not excessively burly. At a glance, he seemed difficult to provoke, though nothing about him appeared unusual, except for his golden eyes, which struck fear in all who looked into them. But when Cui Juyan saw those golden eyes, his mind became muddled for the first time, an imperial descendant. The Moongaze Li family carries the orthodox bloodline. The Cui family might mistake other lineages, but the blood of Wei's Li family could never be mistaken. The man before him might not match the late Crown Prince Li Zengquan, yet he stood on par with Li Xuan, the leader of the Restoration. Overwhelmed, Cui Juyan dropped to his knees and respectfully declared, "I pay my respects, Your Highness." Li Xiaowei seemed to be in a good mood. Though he did not recognize the man, he lifted his chin slightly and gave a brief acknowledgement, his gaze filled with curiosity. Li Ziming smiled and explained, "Mingwang, this man is a Cui family direct descendant." Li Xiaowei understood immediately and replied with a nod, "So it is a member of the Cui family. There is no need for such formality." Cui Juyan respectfully withdrew to the side. Another man then appeared from behind Li Xiaowei. He was massive in stature, broad-shouldered and barrel-waisted, with two golden hammers in his hands. A hint of joy showed on Li Xiaowei's face as he said, "Reporting to Taoist Master, Li Wen has successfully broken through and reached the Foundation Establishment realm." It was none other than Li Wen, who had been cultivating in seclusion within the spirit jade mine of the Helen Mountain Range. Li Ziming raised his eyebrows and said with a laugh, "What remarkable fortune, and how could it not be so?" Li Wen was the one who benefited most from heaven's timing, the land's advantage, and human support in his attempt at Foundation Establishment realm. Li Ziming had examined him before and judged his chances far inferior to the late Li Qinglao. Yet against all expectations, Li Wen had succeeded. Li Ziming looked on with emotion and said, "You cultivate the jade true Tao, and your innate ability is nearly the same as Njayan's. By fate, you were never meant to achieve the Foundation Establishment realm. Yet while you were still in the Qi cultivation realm, a true monarch attained the Tao, causing jade stones to flourish across the land, and you gained a sliver of opportunity. So you entered seclusion to attempt a breakthrough. At the same time, your family benefited from the northern and southern conflict, gaining ample essence gathering pills that were once impossible to obtain. Later, you discovered the spirit jade mine in the Helen Mountain Range, a place filled with spiritual energy. Even the direct descendants of the Azure Pawn sect do not enjoy such fortune. You remained in seclusion for 7 years, so your Foundation Establishment realm must have been extremely difficult. But when the cultivator of Mount Changhui fell, the aura of dwelling heart that charges profundity was released. It benefited both the ancient merging Tao and immortal Tao, as well as secluded cultivation. Since the Jade True Dao is itself an ancient merging Dao, you truly seized every advantage. Li Wen was a simple and honest man. He only knelt and nodded, while Li Ziming laughed heartily and said, "With so many blessings gathered, how could your foundation establishment realm possibly fail?" Li Xiaowei nodded with a smile, while Li Wen rumbled in his deep voice, "I, Li Wen, relied only on luck." It is Taoist master who deserves congratulations. With a purple mansion realm cultivator rising over the lake, that accomplishment surpasses 100 men like me. Li Wen was already an old man. Li Ziming had seen him standing by Li Yuanping's side since childhood. When his father died, the old man had wept bitterly, and Li Ziming had never forgotten it. Remembering all this, he felt deeply gratified and praised him with repeated words of approval. Qi Juyan, standing to the side, observed carefully. Though he believed this rough-looking man would not last 50 exchanges against him, he silently took note of Li Wen's closeness to Li Ziming. Li Ziming asked, "Juyan, what kind of cultivation techniques do you practice? What scriptures have you studied, and what spell arts have you trained in?" Qi Juyan quickly replied, "I practice the Everbright platform, which is based on a 5th grade cultivation technique. I have read most of the volumes from my family's Bright Yang records. I have trained in spell arts, radiance lights, perception technique arts, and footwork techniques. These are required for all members of my family. I rank in the top 3 among my peers on the island. In combat, devil cultivators and rogue cultivators pose no concern. As long as the Dao lineages are not in conflict, I can hold my own even against mid or late foundation establishment realm opponents. I can also stand toe-to-toe against noble demonic creatures of the sea with equal cultivation." Li Ziming nodded in satisfaction and instructed Li Wen, "Take this young lord of the Qi family below and arrange proper lodging for him on the island." Qi Juyan accepted the order and rose, but could not help glancing once more at Li Xiaowei. Li Ziming chuckled and said, "Once all matters are settled, you may sit and speak in detail with Mingwang." The two of them quickly left. Only then did Li Ziming withdraw his smile and say, "This journey has indeed yielded no small harvest." He recounted the harvests of this journey, took out the scripture of the body-guarding tiger pass for Li Xiaowei to read, and finally said, "Qi Juyan is not one to boast. Since he claimed he could withstand them, his strength must truly be comparable. He has trained in many spell arts and possesses deep cultivation. In our family, perhaps only you can suppress him. Cheng Hui and Wei Zheng would at least fall into disadvantage if they fought him for 100 rounds. If the fight dragged past 100 rounds, they would be in danger." Qi Xianai had clearly not treated the matter lightly. Though this was not the same as the strong support once given by Li Zengquan or Li Xuan, he had still sent one of his family's finest disciples. Li Xiaowei nodded. The Qi and Li families both hail from Wei State. Of the 4 true monarchs of Wei's Li, 2 belong to the Qi family. Their loyalty through generations is beyond question. Though their line has also perished, with only one branch remaining, it still carries the same blood and character. The Changzhou Qi family was a traceable branch of the Qi lineage, unlike the Li family, which openly denied its past. Their situation was far better. Li Xiaowei drew a letter from his sleeve and handed it to Li Ziming. It was about the matter of the Mifan 3 sects, entrusted by Li Chenghui. Li Ziming read it carefully, feeling somewhat stirred in his heart. Since the Mifan 3 sects have a legacy, could it be that they also possess? He was naturally referring to the mirror fragment. Their family had once taken such a piece from a Mifan cultivator. But he didn't need to voice it. Li Xiaowei already understood and replied, "We must not act based on a single side's words when it comes to matters of Purple Mansion realm cultivators. This affair may not be as simple as it appears. Our family already has many pressing concerns. Such a spirit artifact is not something gained in just a year or 2. We should watch and wait. As for Wenhu, since he holds the hidden Cloud Dao lineage, we cannot rashly kill him. I've placed him under gentle confinement and allowed him to recover. I'll slowly gather information from him. If this matter proves true, our family will not be left without a card to play. Go ahead and handle it boldly," replied Li Ziming. Li Ziming felt assured with Li Xiaowei in charge. He then brought out the divine technique of pavilion view, refining within fire that Changxi had given, and instructed Li Xiaowei to begin planning the construction of the high platform. He then asked, "How goes the jade court needed for dust of the court?" The aged courtly path scripture of the lake was also a Purple Mansion realm technique, but dust of the court required the construction of a vast jade court. It was the very purpose of the Li family's mining in the Helen Mountain range. Li Xiaowei replied, "We had already gathered enough jade years ago, and the mining in the Helen Mountain range has since been halted. but our family has been overwhelmed with troubles in recent years and had no mind to build such a jade court. The heaps of jade stones mined remain in the Helen Mountains, most never transported back. Moreover, the jade court is an immense undertaking that drains people and resources. Li Ziming understood. When it came to moving mountains and stones, who could compare to their neighbor Profound Peak Gate? It was merely a matter of giving a nod. He said, "This matter is easily handled. Write a letter to Kong Guxi and ask him to send some Earth Virtue Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators to transport the jade for us. Then use the Immortal Foundation to construct the jade court. We should aim to finish as much as possible with these 3 years. Also, ask Kong Guxi for a handwritten letter from Changxi so that we may relocate our Foundation Establishment Realm spirit route to the island." Chapter 1084, The Secret of Essence Gathering Pill II. After finishing with those matters, Li Ziming prepared to enter seclusion. He issued his final instructions, taking a small purple flame cauldron from his sleeve and saying, "This is the Dharma artifact left behind by Yu Yue. Send someone to return it." Even without the Chuoba family's mark carved on the cauldron, the Li family would never covet what belonged to others. The Yu family had already fractured into pieces, and Yu Yue himself had long ceased returning home. Sending the relic to Li Quantao for him to decide its fate was already a gesture that kept it from falling into the hands of outsiders. After settling the miscellaneous matters, Li Ziming instructed, "Our family has reached a prosperity unseen in 100 years. Bright Yang has you to hold the line. Jade True has Siwei and Li Wen. Celestial Thunder has Chenghui. True Fire has Minggong. Supreme Shaman has Chenghui. True Essence has the White Ape. Beyond them we also have Earth Virtue with Buzhai, Converging Water with Maiyashui, Qi Juyan of Bright Yang, and Hengzhu with Ding Weizeng. Excluding those imprisoned in the dungeon, those sealed away, and Jiang Huzi whose end is near, our family already has 11 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. We have reached the level once held by the Yuan family. And with me sitting in command, we must be all the more cautious in this era." By his count, their family had 11 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators, which was still short of the 12 required for the divine technique of Pavilion View, refining within fire. Moreover, not everyone was free, since each one was already burdened with responsibilities. Their manpower was still lacking. Li Ziming asked, "Who else in the family still has a chance at Foundation Establishment Realm?" Li Xiaowei, well versed in this matter, replied, "If Chen Mufeng and Ensiming from back then were still alive, they too could now attempt the Foundation Establishment Realm. 2 members of the Tian family perished while trying to break through in seclusion. The Jade Court guards have already lost a 3rd man to a failed breakthrough. The Su family has declined. As for the Fei family, there is Fei Qingyi of Western Pool descent. Many of their descendants still train in the Qi cultivation realm, but since they were a dispossessed family who changed their surname, their vital Qi has been greatly damaged. None among them has yet managed to achieve Foundation Establishment Realm. Only Chen Yang is already very close." Chen Yang, Li Ziming finally recalled this figure and said, "He cultivates pit water. A pity indeed, but he can at least take another's place and free them up. As for the Fei family, there was once Fei Qingyi, who served at my elder brother's side. He can still be of some use." When speaking of breaking through to the Foundation Establishment Realm, Li Ziming fell silent for a moment before asking, "Do any of the essence-gathering pills bestowed by the Azure Pond sect in those years remain? Bring them here for me to see." "There are indeed some left," replied Li Xiaowei, and he sent someone to fetch them. Chen Yang soon arrived with them. Li Ziming glanced at him, received the pills, and immediately dismissed him. "In total, we received 7 from the Azure Pond sect. Father, aunt, uncle, Siwei, and Li Wen have already used theirs. Only 2 remain." Heavenly light surged between Li Ziming's brows. He scanned each pill with his divine sense, then finally closed his eyes and ground his teeth, spitting out, "Good." The Li family now also possessed the recipe for the essence-gathering pill and could refine it themselves. They no longer needed to beg as before. Though not entirely clear at first, Li Ziming only needed to glance at the formula and then at the pills to immediately discern the truth. The Tao principles behind the essence-gathering pill were in fact not so different from the Purple Mansion Realm's profound method of continuation, or the Purple Mansion Realm's spirit item, assisted cultivation in divine ability. Li Ziming had some knowledge of both. Though his Taoist arts were not refined, his mastery of pill refining was profound. His insight was precise and penetrating. The essence-gathering pill, no matter how many precious supplementary herbs it uses, relies entirely on a single main ingredient. In ancient times, it was the unimaginably rare and precious azure amber spirit grass. Nowadays it varies according to the cultivator. For those of the pit water lineage, the best choice is pit water itself, refined through a corresponding divine technique. Then the effect is no longer a mere 10 or 20%, but that of a true essence-gathering pill. Their ancestor Li Tongye had once taken such a treasure pill, carefully refined by a purple mansion realm cultivator, and had broken through foundation establishment realm with ease. Li Ziming sighed in his heart and said, "The finest main ingredient is that of a fellow cultivator. Second best is a demonic creature. Only then come the treasured panaceas. The best is to use 3, the bare minimum is 1. Now it is clear why so many of the Purple Mansion realm cultivators' direct descendants could achieve the foundation establishment realm. It was no mystery at all. They kept the secret of the essence-gathering pill and never shared it. What they handed out to guest cultivators or peak masters were diluted versions, which were at most 10 or 20% effective and still counted as inner sect treatment. To the obedient, they gave slightly better ones in secret. To the rebellious or threatening, they gave inferior ones. Some were even given main ingredients in conflict with their Dao lineages, which could only harm them. How much effect those pills had is anyone's guess. Li Xiaowei immediately lifted his head, as if suddenly enlightened. His eyes went from calm to fierce. His voice was filled with shock, fury, and venom as he asked, "The ones Azure Pond sect gave our family. Of course they were the worst, and not merely the worst." Li Ziming finally tore away his facade of restraint and said harshly, "I examined every one of those main ingredients. They were all veiled yin or radiant essence. Why did Qingliao fail in his breakthrough? His Dao foundation was bright yang. To make him take veiled yin and radiant essence-gathering pills, how could this make any sense? The 5 essence-gathering pills from Azure Pond sect bore gray striations, made from demonic creatures and treasured panaceas. Li Ziming had examined them at the time and allowed the family to use them, but back then he could not discern the distinctions of the immortal foundation. Li Xiaowei closed his eyes at last, finally understanding why his father Li Qingliao, after only a few short years in seclusion, had suffered a sudden failure and death. The omens had not even been pronounced. Why was it that the same essence-gathering pills had allowed his aunt Li Minggong and Ensiwei to pass their trials with nothing more than fright, while his father, whose temperament and cultivation method were of the highest grade, had perished? Li Ziming let out a long breath, and the brilliance in his eyes grew clearer as he thought, "I still remember. Lord Chunfeng exchanged with the Azure Pond sect back then for an essence-gathering pill for second uncle Li Yuanjiao. Realizing it was a human pill, he refused to use it and instead gave it to Yuan Haiyuan. That man actually succeeded in one stroke, reaching Earth Virtue Foundation establishment realm. Thinking of it now, it must have been an Earth Virtue essence-gathering pill, with earth-smothering pit water. What a perfect match of earth-smothering pit water." Li Ziming digested this thought for a moment before saying, "The Kai family was destroyed and Kai Fubo and Ning Hijing have both died, with not even their bones remaining. Otherwise, these wretches ought to have been torn apart by my hand." Though he spoke harshly, Li Ziming understood in his heart that Si Boxiu must have known the truth of it, and even Si Yuanli might have been perfectly aware. They had simply kept it hidden, unwilling to speak. After all, given the circumstances back then, weakening our family was something the Si family would gladly witness. There was no need for them to warn us. Li Xiaowei lowered his head in silence. Li Ziming did not know how to respond, and could only sigh and say, "Among the 3 carts of spirit items gifted by the Xiao family, there are 2 pit water treasured panaceas. Bring them here for me to refine pills. Once the pills are complete, I shall enter seclusion to cultivate my divine ability. A great enemy draws near." Li Xiaowei, now recovered from his thoughts, nodded and withdrew, saying, "Leave the family matters to me, Taoist master. You may rest assured." Time passed quietly on the lake as spring turned to autumn. A year and more was nothing but the span of a single seclusion to the Purple Mansion realm cultivators. Though Li Ziming had mastered a divine ability, his command of spell arts were lacking, so he began with the simplest one, Heavenly Radiance, Hidden Light. Fortunately, cultivating with a divine ability made progress in spell arts much faster. Li Ziming had studied Heavenly Radiance, Hidden Light before, so he soon advanced. Once he was midway, he undertook a visit to Xuanmiao Temple. Sumian received him warmly, but when asked about the Mifan 3 sects, he spoke only of old matters and could not provide any clear explanation. After much thought, Li Ziming concluded he might need to seek out Taoist master Chang Yun of Brahma Cloud Cave. However, while passing through profound Peak Gates territory, he saw ripples forming faintly within the great void. The spiritual energy of stable earth surged and fell upon the land. Looking carefully at the earth veins, he saw that a new mountain had risen within profound Peak Gate's domain. Who is the one that failed to break through? Changxi would surely be stricken with grief, though it was within the expectations of the Purple Mansion realm cultivators and Li Ziming. The earth-consuming, demon-suppressing force of Dwelling Heart that charges profundity was no trifling matter. Changxi's own remaining lifespan had been drastically cut, let alone the fates of several Foundation Establishment realm cultivators. Best return to the mountain first. Changxi will surely come seeking me, thought Li Ziming. Chapter 1085 Becoming a Mountain I. Li Ziming stepped out of the Great Void on Zhaijing Mountain. Once he heard Li Wen's report, he asked about news from Profound Peak Gate. Taoist Master, there was a tremor at midnight in Shanji Prefecture, and the skies turned gloomy. Profound Peak Gate claimed to the outside world that it was a Taoist Master moving a mountain. The phenomenon of earth virtue cultivators was tied to the earth veins, and the celestial signs revealed little. Profound Peak Gate also had a Purple Mansion realm formation, so Changxi's claim of moving a mountain served as a cover. Outwardly, it was merely an extra peak. Yet from within the Great Void, it was clear that someone had failed to break through. Li Ziming asked, "Where is Minghuang, who is managing the household right now?" Li Wen replied, "Taoist Master, the family head has gone to White River Stream. Currently, the eldest young master oversees household affairs." Upon hearing that Li Jiangqian was in charge, Li Ziming asked, "When I emerged from the Great Void, I saw crowds gathered on the lake. What's happening?" Li Wen answered, "Taoist Master, the eldest young master moved declining families from the island to the lakeside, placing them under the 6 gates. He also brought the direct descendants at the Qi cultivation and the Foundation Establishment realm back into the island." Li Ziming nodded and asked about Li Xiaowei's sons. On the surface, the eldest, Li Jiangqian, managed the family. The second son, Li Jianglong, had gone to Profound Peak Gate. The third, Li Jiangxia, handled affairs on the eastern shore. The fourth, Jiangliang, had just left the residence and was cultivating. What of the youngest young master? Is he the same as his elder brothers? After hearing no mention of Li Jiangnian, Li Ziming asked carefully. Li Wen answered dully, "The color of the youngest young master's eyes fades as he grows. His heroic bearing is lesser than that of the other young masters." Li Ziming had never seen the fifth son, Li Jiangnian, but for Li Wen to speak so bluntly, it was not something that could be summed up with a mere lesser than. He understood the implication and dismissed Li Wen. He had only been sitting at the table for a short while before Changxi's mana manifestation appeared in the Great Void. Although the Li family lacked the Purple Mansion realm formation that allowed direct entry, Changxi still halted outside in advance, offered polite greetings, and only then entered. The old Taoist master appeared as a man in his middle years, with jade at his chest and a ruddy, vigorous complexion. Yet even without skill in divination or physiognomy, Li Ziming could see that his divine abilities were leaking, agitating the earth veins until they grew unnaturally restless. He was clearly at death's door. No one dared provoke him now. Li Ziming spoke gently, "Senior, you have come. I heard the earth veins within Profound Peak Gate's domain have become unstable. May I ask what has happened?" Changxi sat opposite him, his expression calm as he replied, "Fu En has perished. There is simply one more mountain within my domain." His indifference left Li Ziming unsure how to respond. After a moment of silence, Taoist Master Changxi said, "Zheujing, I will be gone soon and become a mountain. Have you considered where this mountain should fall?" Li Ziming immediately realized that Changxi's condition was far worse than he had imagined. Perhaps he had suffered a severe blow, or perhaps the Dwelling Heart that charges profundity was nearing its peak. Regardless, the old man could no longer endure for 2 more years. Fortunately, he was not wandering outside, nor had he gone to Shiki Island. If Changxi had suddenly collapsed, it would have caused serious trouble. He let out a breath and began to contemplate Changxi's final arrangements. According to his words, he will become a mountain after death. Since he's a Purple Mansion realm cultivator, this mountain would surely be extraordinary, a treasured land. Li Ziming had little interest in preserving Shanji Prefecture, nor did he have confidence in holding Profound Peak Gate. It would be best for Changxi to pass away sitting beside the lake, for his family would then gain an additional stable mountain. But I cannot very well say. It would trouble me if Senior were to die within my domain. Such words could not be spoken aloud. Since Changxi had asked, he must have more to say. Li Ziming could only reply, "Has Senior made arrangements? Everything shall proceed according to your will." Changxi glanced at him and nodded. "Zheujing, even if you did not say it, I understand." Shanji Prefecture cannot be preserved, and my own gate may not withstand the coming storm. I cannot strengthen the enemy for nothing. Xuanmiao Temple is also of earth virtue, and Taoist friend Sumian has invited me to White Sea Stream for discourse. I have calculated that my end draws near, and so I invite you to come along. Changxi drew a jade box from his sleeve. It contained a round white pearl, glowing with fine radiant light and carved with the image of a tiger glancing back. Its brilliance lit up the surroundings. Changxi said, "Take this, Zheajing. This mid-grade stable earth spirit artifact, the mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger, after being passed back and forth, had finally fallen into Li Ziming's hands. Li Ziming no longer declined. He reached out to take it, and a chilling earth fiend chill spread from the pearl. The carved patterns were sharply distinct, even prickly to the touch. As Changxi withdrew his divine abilities mana from the artifact and relinquished its control, bright yang divine ability seeped into it. The mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger was a spirit artifact more formidable than the Changming Profound Insight Screen once refined by the Li family. Without Changxi's voluntary transfer, refining it would have taken untold time. Yet now, the moment it entered his hand, Li Ziming naturally comprehended its powers with his divine ability. The mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger possessed protective stable earth energy and was an excellent defensive artifact. It could release the mountain-charging profound veil to shroud the body, and it also bestowed a stable earth spirit infusion upon Li Ziming, lessening the damage from all divine abilities except those of the 12 essences and fire virtue. It also contained a wondrous earth-escaping technique, the sea-pacing profound escape, which allowed him to sink into the ground like an earth virtue cultivator, traversing earth veins at a speed beyond mortal. Lastly, it held the stable tiger Dao, which transformed the artifact into a stable tiger that roamed the great void. Though it lacked combat ability, it possessed concealment. Unless the great void had a formation that could entrap it, most Purple Mansion Realm divine abilities would merely brush by it before it slipped deep into the void. It was nearly impossible to intercept. The artifact contained many other intricate earth virtue marvels. As a Purple Mansion Realm stable earth symbol, if Li Ziming's cultivation deepened, he could employ it to freely cast spells. Just as Sumian had once borrowed Li Ziming and Changxi's energy to treat Ding Weizeng, leaving the mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger nearby would serve the same purpose without Changxi. What a fine spirit artifact. Though Changxi never bore much renown in his life, he kept a great many treasures stashed in his chest. This artifact is truly useful, thought Li Ziming. Though the pressure upon him was now greater, Li Ziming was deeply satisfied with the mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger. He sent someone to inform Li Zhaowei, then rose with Changxi. The old man accompanied him into the great void, speaking in a leisurely tone. Zheajing, though the mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger resonates more closely with the divine abilities of Sumian and I, it does not hold any exceptional abilities, and many overlap with ours. We discussed it and decided it would be better for you to wield it. If a direct clash with Purple Mansion Realm cultivators comes, we will mainly rely on your heaven-venerating gate. Though he spoke thus, Li Ziming knew it was not truly about divine abilities. The heaven-venerating gate indeed leaned toward a combat spell divine ability, but in the end it was because he and Yi Hui stood on opposing paths. Thus Li Ziming answered, "I understand." Changxi continued, "The mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger also bears the common traits of earth spirit artifacts and may be counted as a tool of the devil Dao. It can not only be maintained with a divine ability, but refining it with blood qi or resentment qi brings even greater benefit. Over long years, it may even undergo wondrous transformations." Chapter 1086, Becoming a Mountain II. This left Li Ziming speechless. Suspicion stirred at once. The mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger in his hand was of mid-grade quality. Perhaps it was even elevated to that level while in Changxi's possession. Yet Changxi immediately cut off his doubts. I had thought to refine it further in years past, but it was something of a chicken rib to me, neither useless nor truly useful. It required vast quantities of materials, and such things are scarce across the mainland. I received little and used most of it for other refinements. He pointed to the jade at his chest, which Li Ziming had long noticed. This is the Essence Stone Devil Fetus. I began refining it 200 years ago, spending more than half of my life's fortune. Were it not for the spiritual aura of the dwelling heart that charges profundity restraining me, and the falling water rising storm of the eastern sea, I would never have reached this state. Li Ziming's heart trembled at the name, though outwardly he only appeared contemplative. Changxi laughed and said, "This technique is a secret of my Dao lineage. It harms the balance of heaven and earth, yet it can extend life. Its reputation is ill, and the drawbacks are many. Even my predecessors who resorted to it did so in secret. Why is he telling me this?" Li Ziming paused slightly, but Changxi had already turned away, his voice growing heavier. "In truth, the great families guard against earth virtue orthodoxy with deep suspicion, especially when it walks the devil Dao. Other Dao lineages may be overlooked, but earth virtue cultivators are regarded as true devil cultivators. The families all harbor fear. Though the upheaval at Thunder Palace brought them gain, none wished to see it happen again. Li Ziming himself knew only a little of such matters. Though uncertain of Changxi's source, he would not let it pass and pressed further. "I have also studied the art of the diverse mansion unified furnace. Beyond the Purple Mansion realm, there is little difference from the Purple Mansion Golden Core Dao, orthodoxy of the Devil Dao. Would that be like Chuoba Changyuan? More or less," Changxi said slowly. "The Diverse Mansion Unified Furnace and the Purple Mansion Golden Core Dao are the same in essence, both belonging to the Devil Dao of this age. There were devil cultivators in ancient times too. How else would Qi Li have become a devil monarch? The Chuoba family itself is a branch of orthodox devil cultivators." The old man exhaled heavily through his nose, gritting his teeth as he said, "Arts are not lightly passed on, hence there arises orthodoxy. This one is orthodox, that one is orthodox. Those who attain fruition refuse to impart their true techniques and hand down side paths instead. When they fall into our hands, we then use foundation establishment texts to bind those beneath us. Is it not all from the same source? Common folk bow their heads before our direct descendants, and we bow our heads before the so-called orthodox. To be treated as playthings, is this not the way of things?" He seemed to be recollecting the bitter memories of his own one-stick-of-incense clan. Exhaling twice, about to perish, he forced himself to reveal his form upon the dark cliffs and descended toward Xuanmiao Temple with Li Ziming. However, it was not Qi Qiuxin who came forth to meet them, but a pale, beardless middle-aged man, Kong Guxi. The people of Profound Peak Gate had already arrived ahead of them. Kong Guxi craned his neck, fearful as a plucked quail. His already large eyes bulged wider, making the Taoist robe upon him seem like nothing but an empty garment rack. He drifted forward, only to be brusquely swept aside by Changxi. Stumbling, he struck the ground with a clumsy bow and burst into sobs. Changxi ignored him, turning only to Sumian, the aged temple master who stood wringing his hands in unease. Changxi said, "Which courtyard? Has fellow Taoist arranged it?" Sumian hurried to guide him, leading the way to the edge of the cliff. Anxiously he said, "Fellow Taoist, that thing." Changxi removed the essence stone devil fetus from his neck and pushed it into his hand. No third person knows of this item. Li Ziming had been standing quietly to the side, his brows lowered, feigning restrained sorrow, while his thoughts thundered. "No third person knows. You just told me." What does Changxi mean by this? A handle, a hint. The essence stone devil fetus is ill-reputed and brings many drawbacks. Is he leaving me leverage to coerce Xuanmiao Temple into taking the field in the future? Li Ziming kept his composure and showed no outward reaction. Sumian silently accepted the item and replied, "I will do all I can to safeguard Profound Peak Gate." By then, they had arrived at the courtyard. Everything within 50 kilometers had been cleared. It had plainly been prepared long ago for Changxi's death. The land was barren and yellow, with only a few weak blades of grass swaying in the spring breeze. Stones were already falling from beneath Changxi's robe, clattering against the ground and scattering earth and rock. He hastily descended into the courtyard. His robe fluttered, yet he seemed graceless, like a bird hurling itself into a snare, before sitting cross-legged upon the couch. Xuanmiao Temple was plain and simple, and this courtyard was no exception. When he sat upon the couch, it seemed as though even his limbs could not stretch out straight. "Kong Guxi," Changxi called out, and Kong Guxi hurriedly rose into the air, only to tumble down again with a swoosh. He landed before Changxi, unable to care about the humiliation of seeing his family's ancestor sitting in withered silence in the courtyard, craning his head forward in fearful reverence. Changxi murmured, "Kong Guxi, our Kong family rose from obscurity and was never destined for the Purple Mansion realm. A true monarch was reborn and slaughtered my kin, and thus fortune shifted onto me, forcing me to ascend to the Purple Mansion realm as nothing more than a stepping stone for others." Kong Guxi bowed his head in silence. Li Ziming frowned, while fear stirred in Sumian, who stood beside Li Ziming. Sumian murmured, "The old man has grown muddled. Such words must not be spoken." Changxi seemed suddenly fevered. He stretched his leg, rolled up his sleeves, then seemed like he was about to speak but stopped. He only said, "Obey the orders of Taoist Master Zheujing." Kong Guxi nodded again. Changxi could no longer sit upright and fell upon the couch, rolling back and forth as the ground rumbled beneath him. At last he said, "Upon my death I shall become a mountain, a kilometer tall. To the north shall rise 3 peaks, each 100 paces apart. To the east and south 9 peaks, rich with persimmon trees. The sunny side shall bear much red copper, the shaded side much white gold. Directly south a spring shall gush with white jade, flowing south to become a stream that empties into Lake Xi'an. In its waters will dwell vipers and black turtles. My Kong family descendants may worship from afar, but may not climb upon it." Kong Guxi wept. This junior has remembered it all. Taoist Master Changxi gave a muffled groan and cried out, "My pain is unbearable." His cry was like thunder, and the earth veins beneath swelled like an inflating balloon. Jagged white rock and towering mountains burst forth from the soil, peaks sprouting like bamboo shoots after rain. Kong Guxi could not even stand upright. His stumbling, choked cry of respectfully sending off the ancestor was drowned completely by the quaking earth. No one heard him as the mountains rose sharply beneath his feet. Red copper, white gold, 12 peaks emerged one after another. Springs gushed forth, trees thickened rapidly into shade, and the faint sound of cicadas filled the air. Every word of Changxi's prophecy was fulfilled without the slightest deviation. The courtyard and the old man that sat there moments ago seemed but an illusion. Only a Taoist robe hanging from a treetop remained before Kong Guxi, fluttering lifelessly. The forest lay in dreadful silence as the branches cast shadows all around. Kong Guxi carefully pulled the robe down, took 2 bewildered steps, and finally heard the cries of astonishment and words of praise rising from the Xuanmiao temple cultivators at the mountain's base. Kong Guxi thought, there should be laughter as well, should there not? Chapter 1087, Four Borders I. The mountain had surged straight into the sky. Li Ziming rose on heavenly light and saw Kong Guxi clinging to a tree as he peered into the distance. His panicked expression was devoid of any trace of a profound Peak's Gate master's dignity. There was no successor to begin with. Changxi had no choice but to pick someone, and obedience mattered more than boldness. Besides, with Kong Guxi's own family's purple mansion realm perished, anyone would be left stunned, thought Li Ziming. Though Changxi had never truly confided in him, he was still an elder who had offered much guidance during the early days of his purple mansion realm. Li Ziming bowed his head in respect. The disciples of Xuanmiao Temple below were still marveling and praising the phenomenon. Even Kong Guxi could hear them, let alone cultivators like Li Ziming and Sumian who had attained divine abilities. No matter how far Changxi had fallen, he had still been a purple mansion realm cultivator. Li Ziming merely raised his head, hands clasped behind his back, and remained silent. Sumian was no ordinary man. He only needed a glance to notice Li Ziming's displeasure. The Xuanmiao Temple was loosely structured and retained much of the old ways, with few strict rules, so order often unraveled. He waved his hand, signaling Qi Qiuxin to go down and disperse the crowd. Kong Guxi had already taken flight on the wind, clutching a set of Taoist robes in his arms. He clearly intended to return and bury them. He stopped before Li Ziming and spoke respectfully. "Greetings, Taoist master. All of profound Peak Gate looks to you for direction." Li Ziming nodded and waited until Kong Guxi had steadied himself in the heavenly light. Then he turned to Sumian and finally voiced the doubt that had been weighing on his mind. "Senior Qi, where is Taoist Master Xuanye?" Li Ziming remembered it clearly. Changxi's support had not been limited to Xuanmiao Temple. There was also Jingyi Mountain across the outer sea. Taoist Master Xuanye had taken Yuzhu Island and received many benefits from Changxi. Changxi's death had even been partly due to aiding Jingyi Mountain. And though Changxi was now dead, Xuanyi had not even shown his face. Sumian shook his head. He no longer concealed his feelings, and a clear look of disgust appeared on his face as he answered, "Xuanyi is not a good person. Changxi was obviously a burden once he was on the verge of death. What Outer Sea Purple Mansion Realm cultivator would be eager to come near that?" He paused briefly before continuing, "Xuanyi is at odds with the Chunyi Dao. Ever since Taoist Master Guanghu of Chunyi Dao attained the Purple Mansion Realm, he has been unable to act freely and finds himself in a difficult position. Otherwise, why would he have bothered with Changxi at all? Naturally, he could not come." The Chunyi Dao was also a Dao lineage steeped in ancient traditions. Qi Qiuxin had even once joined forces with them to ambush a Jiangnan devil cultivator and seize the purple flame cauldron for the Li family. The bond between Xuanmiao Temple and the Chunyi Dao was clearly unusual, so it was no wonder Sumian disliked Xuanyi. Now that he knew this key detail, Li Ziming now understood the source of Sumian's disdain. but this was not the time to concern himself with Xu. He still needed to clarify Xuanmiao Temple's intentions. Li Ziming glanced at Kong Guxi, who had yet to react, so he spoke up himself. Now that Senior Kong has fallen, the celestial phenomena are clear, and the earth veins are plain for all to see. Every household knows that the Baiai capital Immortal Dao has long coveted Shanji Prefecture. Senior, you promised to protect Profound Peak Gate. What are your plans? Taoist Master Sumian stroked his beard and answered softly, Brother Changxi and my Xuanmiao Temple have been close for many years, so we cannot simply stand by. But Profound Peak Gate's territory is vast, and there are those who covet it on all four borders. I fear that the strength of our two families alone cannot secure it entirely. What can be ceded should be ceded. The lives of the younger generation matter most. Profound Peak Gate's domain, with Shanji Prefecture and the Profound Peak Gate as its core, extended its influence from Lake Xi'an to the wilderness. When he heard Sumian speak of ceding territory so readily, Li Ziming had no choice but to ask, Senior, are you saying? Sumian shook his head and replied, Rest easy, Zheajing. My Xuanmiao Temple's cultivators have already gone to garrison the Lake Xi'an region. That area is the heartland of our influence and cannot be allowed to fall into chaos. As for the lands west of the wilderness, I fear our reach cannot extend so far. The Li family and Xuanmiao Temple flank the Profound Peak Gate from opposite sides, bordering the wilderness and Lake Xi'an respectively. Li Ziming immediately understood so. Xuanmiao Temple intends to seize Profound Peak Gate's sphere of influence over Lake Xi'an, leaving the wilderness to my family. It might have seemed like an even division with each taking one side, but the two were nothing alike. Setting aside the Li family's long and vulnerable border with Bai, even a fool like Yi Hui would understand that Xuanmiao Temple's long-standing neutrality meant they would only need to focus on the Li family. Xuanmiao Temple seemed to be defending the region, but in truth, they were merely claiming the Lake Xi'an territory for themselves. They were all Purple Mansion realm cultivators. How could Li Ziming fail to see through it? He immediately furrowed his brow, but Sumian did not relent and continued, Rest assured, Zheajing. I intend to seek out Yi Hui and attempt to dissuade him. Brother Changxi's bones are not yet cold. Things do not need to become too violent. If something truly happens, I will not stand idly by. Sumian's meaning was clear. The Li family would be the one to face Baiai Immortal Dao directly. Xuanmiao Temple had no desire to offend Yi Hui, but if a conflict between Purple Mansion realm cultivators arose, Sumian was at least willing to intervene and mediate. Li Ziming remained silent, so Sumian turned to Kong Guxi. Your gate is right next to Lake Xi'an. If your gate faces any difficulties or your disciples are injured, send them here immediately. Xuanmiao Temple will not sit idly by. The same applies to Moongaze. A headache started to form in Li Ziming's temples, but Kong Guxi responded respectfully, Taoist Master, when our ancestor passed, he instructed us juniors to follow Taoist Master Zheajing's orders in all things. We await your immortal decree. Sumian nodded. Li Ziming had long known the attitudes of these Purple Mansion Taoist masters. They might act benevolent in ordinary times, but they would never exhaust their own strength for another's losses. Promises flowed freely while Changxi lived, but once he died, the division of spoils depended entirely on conscience. Still, Sumian was far better than Xuanyi. Li Ziming could not afford to linger here. After a brief farewell, he tore open the great void with a casual gesture and sped away with Kong Guxi, asking as they traveled, how are Profound Peak Gate's defenses arranged? There's no need to station forces at Lake Xi'an. Send everyone to guard the wilderness. Kong Guxi remained composed as he answered, Taoist Master, our ancestor left deployment instructions before his passing. At present, we have 3 foundation establishment cultivators in the early stage, 1 in the mid-stage, and 1 in the late stage among our direct descendants, along with 9 guest cultivators. All are stationed along the riverbank in the wilderness. Lake Xi'an is completely unguarded. Changxi had calculated everything precisely, otherwise, he would not have said those things to Li Ziming. With a total of 14 foundation establishment realm cultivators, though none were particularly outstanding, they still formed the backbone of an immortal family and would not be wiped out easily. Li Ziming then asked about the only battle-hardened cultivator Profound Peak Gate had, where is Fu Yuezi? Kong Guxi replied, he is stationed in the wilderness. The main force of the Li family was positioned on the eastern shore. From there they could rush northeast to support the wilderness or northwest to reinforce floating south. A few days earlier, Li Zizhai had secretly recalled Li Wushao and Li Qian, and both were now stationed on the eastern shore. They only had time to exchange a few words before Li Ziming and Kong Guxi arrived at the borders of the wilderness. Li Ziming prepared to set Kong Guxi down and instructed him, Jingyi Mountain's Purple Mansion Realm cultivator himself is unavailable, but Xuanye's disciples and grand-disciples must have some numbers. Doesn't your family have someone under his tutelage? Tell them to invite a few senior and junior brothers to help. Kong Guxi quickly nodded and answered, I will prepare generous gifts at once and send someone to Jingyi Mountain to ask our family members to seek their aid. Chapter 1088 Four Borders II, White River Stream. The Hidden East Territory had only been stabilized for the past year and a half. The esteemed families here were well informed and knew a bit about the Kong family's situation. As a result, morale was unsettled, and few cared much for the Li family's stipends as they lived day to day without ambition. Lights blazed on Hongfu Peak as cultivators came and went. The young man seated at the main seat had eyes dark as ink and 6 command tokens floating at his waist. Old bustled in from below and reported, My lord, a messenger from the North Brocade River King has arrived. He says there are changes in the Bai territory. Li Chenghui was the most cautious among the Li family's foundation establishment realm cultivators. He had arranged for the North Brocade River King's envoys to reside on a nearby peak, exchanging jade pendants every month to ensure timely intelligence. After all, it would take them only 15 minutes to fly here, and the territory was still under strict control. A delay in reports could easily mean disaster. Li Chenghui stood up as soon as the news arrived. He had just received word of geomantic upheavals in profound Peak Gates Mountains when Ying Hebai's message followed immediately. In a grave tone, he said, Taoist Master Changxi has fallen. Summon Ding Weizeng and have all Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators withdraw immediately. There's no need to leave from Hongfu Peak. Since Li Xiaowei had sent no word and no reinforcements were coming from the rear, Hongfu Peak could not possibly be held. The Hidden East had never truly been part of the Li family's long-term plans. Aside from the land itself, there was little of real value, and everything that could be moved over the past year or two had already been relocated to the floating South Territory. Aside from the immovable land and esteemed families, what was the most precious thing in the Hidden East? Naturally, it was the cloud-veiling sky ascent formation atop Hongfu Peak. Li Chenghui had only focused on 3 things over the past few years. First, he had relocated the common folk of Hidden East to strengthen floating South, taking pains to migrate only ordinary people unrelated to the esteemed families and never relocating cultivators. Second, he extensively appointed esteemed cultivators to positions of authority, distributing all the spirit fields that Wenhu had painstakingly converted from private to public hands. Thus, in less than 2 years, not only had the population of Hidden East partially declined, but the consolidation of spirit fields had reached an unprecedented scale. The Li family had also reaped substantial profits by reselling them. The third thing he did was to meticulously record the distribution of spirit veins, earth veins, and water veins, working tirelessly to copy down the formation platforms of the cloud-veiling sky ascent formation. Now, by taking the most precious formation plate with them and destroying the formation, Hongfu Mountain would become undefended and immediately turn into a battleground for rogue cultivators and esteemed families to seize. He continued speaking as he strode outside, We won't have time to deal with it. These esteemed families and rogue cultivators will righteously denounce and drive out our Li family. Let them all fight over it among themselves. Once the capital Immortal Dao's forces arrive, they'll certainly station a few here to keep the area under control. Gebuzhai followed him out and spoke quietly. The spiritual energy in Jiangbei is flourishing. We could dig up the earth veins to sever the flow of spiritual energy. Or even fill up the water veins. Li Chenghui retrieved the formation plate from inside the main hall. The one set upon the stone platform was immensely intricate, with silk-like patterns etched across its circular surface. Li Chenghui immediately quashed Gebuzhai's thoughts. Are you trying to get yourself killed? This is Jiangbei, not the Eastern Sea. No one is allowed to tamper with Jiangbei's land. Not even a Purple Mansion Realm cultivator could get away with it. Gebuzhai was startled, realizing he had spoken out of turn, and quickly fell silent, stepping back. The two made their way down the mountain. Li Chenghui, worried that Ding Weizeng and the others might not receive the orders in time, crushed a jade pendant to send a reminder. As soon as they exited the Hidden East Territory, flames roared skyward from Hongfu Mountain. The grand formation shattered, brocade-like clouds sank, and fragments scattered like rain. Dozens of beams of Dharma light shot into the sky soon after, all hesitantly rushing toward Hongfu Mountain. Clearly, the esteemed families had noticed the change. But Li Chenghui was already more than 5 kilometers out of the Hidden East and glanced northward with a hint of regret. Hidden East truly is a land of great wealth. Someday, if there's a chance to set foot here again, we'll bring order to the realm and rally the esteemed families properly, muttered Li Chenghui. He sped away on thunder, reaching the floating south territory in 15 minutes. There the villages were sparse, the formations shone bright and orderly, and the land stood in stark contrast to Hidden East. A woman flew toward him from the distance. Li Minggong wore a crimson dress and wielded the 6-cornered scarlet flame lamp as she rode the flames toward him. Behind her, Siwei followed in jade armor with a spear on his back. Worry lined Li Minggong's brow as she said, "You've arrived just in time, Brother Chenghui. I've just received word that the capital Immortal Dao's chief disciple, Guan Gongxiao, has led a force into the wilderness. The family head has already gone ahead, and they've likely clashed by now. Fortunately, you weren't tied down defending Hongfu Mountain, so your hands are free. I must stay here to hold the line, so please hurry and reinforce them." Li Chenghui had not expected the enemy's assault to come so swiftly. He spoke in a deep voice, "How many cultivators are there?" Li Minggong looked anxious and shook her head. "It's hard to know the full number. Guan Lingdi and Gongsun Beifan have both appeared, along with several well-known Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators who have been recalled from the Outer Sea." Li Chenghui immediately pieced it together. It seems that Guan Gongxiao has sent local powers like Song Yunbai and Wang He to attack Jiangbei, while the main force is heading for the eastern shore. I'll ride thunder there at once. Ding Weizeng will arrive here shortly. Speak with him when he does. Without stopping for even a moment, Li Chenghui led his forces eastward at full speed, vanishing over the horizon. Li Minggong was under orders to guard the floating south territory, which served as a barrier of Moongaze Lake and was in truth even more crucial than the wilderness. Thus she could do nothing but watch him depart. Some time later, the earth veins to the east shifted. Before Li Minggong could even spot Ding Weizeng's figure, a surge of golden light rose from the northwest. A wave of dread seized her chest as she rode the flames high to peer into the distance. Light streaked swiftly across the border, formations shattered, and golden chi surged into the heavens. Li Minggong immediately sensed that something was wrong. She summoned the Jade Court guards and ordered, "Go to the family estate at once and request reinforcements. Ask several Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators to rush to Floating South. This is of utmost importance. We must not be negligent." The guard hurried off immediately. Li Minggong then took out a jade pendant and crushed it. 2 spirit beasts belonging to her senior were stationed on the eastern shore and would arrive in just 15 minutes. With these measures in place, she felt a surge of confidence and immediately took to the skies with Siwei. Siwei peered into the distance and tension instantly clouded his expression. His father and Jian was in that general area. Though there was still some distance between them and the old man was clever enough to stay safe, and Siwei couldn't help but fly a little farther forward. "I should never have assigned him to that area," thought Siwei, and Jian was an old man now and had been given the safest and most leisurely duties. Siwei had not expected a sudden attack from the northwest, and it had put Jian in unexpected danger. Fortunately, the old man had amassed quite a few treasures over the years, and since he was not stationed directly on the border but somewhat deeper inland, he had managed to escape with his life. The 2 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators sped toward his location, straining their eyes into the distance, and soon saw the old man flying toward them in a streak of blood-colored escape light. And Jian had always been completely bald, but now even his beard and eyebrows had turned white. When Li Ziming had attained the Purple Mansion realm, he had personally restored the severed limbs of Jian and Li Keyang. The old man now had all 4 limbs and looked much healthier, though the wrinkles on his face spoke of deepening age. He hurriedly stopped before Li Minggong. The golden aura on the horizon was growing stronger. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood and spoke in a panicked voice. "My lady, Sidumo, sect master of Golden Tang Gate, has led the Golden Tang cultivators over the mountains." Chapter 1089, The Battle of Golden Tang I. Golden Tang Gate, and Siwei's expression changed sharply. Li Minggong hesitated briefly, then retrieved another jade pendant and crushed it, signaling the Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators in the territory to retreat to Floating South's main peak for safety. She ordered, "Just withdraw the people and defend from within the formation. The harvest in Floating South's territory has already been collected. Losing a few years' worth is no big deal. Sidumo has backing. He knows better than to touch the spirit vein." Li Xiaowei had in fact already discussed matters regarding the Golden Tang Gate with Li Minggong and Li Chenghui, so this development was not entirely unexpected. The Golden Tang Gate had declined from its former glory as the foremost gate of Su state since the death of Sidut. It had once boasted 3 Purple Mansion realm cultivators. When the Li family achieved the Dao, they had heard of the Golden Tang Gate's young master's reputation, but by then the gate was a mere shell of its former self, rotting away day by day. After the Lixia disaster passed and Kai Wei died, the gate's only remaining Purple Mansion realm cultivator, Sidu Huo, offended Zhao Shooting, who had achieved the Dao through the life divine ability. As a result, he dared not even return to Jiangnan or Jiangbei. The Golden Tang Gate became nothing more than a stage for the struggle between the Azure Pond sect and the Golden Feather sect. Later, it had been battered by the conflict between the northern and southern factions. To put it bluntly, the current Golden Tang Gate could not even compare to Profound Peak Gate. There were only a handful of guest cultivators, who were hardly worth mentioning. The gate had merely 2 newly advanced Foundation Establishment Realm disciples. Only Sidu Ku and Sidu Baio were worth noting, and the former had already been captured by Li Xiaowei, leaving even the gate seats in council half empty. The only one truly worth fearing was the gate master, Sidu Mo. As Li Minggong led her people back, she said quietly, "Sidu Mo is a cultivator from the same generation as my grandaunt. He is exceedingly suspicious and treacherous. Years ago, when a senior of ours visited Golden Sack Island of the Golden Tang Gate with a bow and slew you, he was so terrified that he didn't dare leave the island for over 20 years. It was only after confirming that the senior was no longer in the Eastern Sea that he fled back to Golden Tang Gate in panic. He did not dare take a single step beyond the gate until that senior fell. Only then did news of him surface again. If he has crossed the mountains now, it seems he does possess some measure of courage." At the mention of that name, Njayan, who stood nearby, showed a look of reminiscence. After swallowing a pill, he said, "I once discussed this man with Elder Chuangshuan. His uncle is Jai Dengqi, a remarkable figure in his own right." Njayan spoke on the matter with authority. In his days as head of the Ren family, he had not only conversed with the Jai family head, but had even participated in a siege against Jai Dengqi himself. On the other hand, Li Minggong was unfamiliar with the man and simply said, "Sidu Mo has lingered at the peak of the Foundation Establishment Realm for decades and may even have cultivated secret techniques. The Golden Tang Gate's Heavenly Lustrous Gold Sutra is a renowned Zheng metal technique. It will be difficult to hold our ground here with just the few of us. I have already sent for reinforcements." No sooner had she finished speaking than a flash of light burst over the main peak of Floating South. A tall man streaked into the formation in a blaze of dark red radiance. His bold brows lifted as he clasped his hands together and spoke in a deep voice, "Weizeng greets you, my lady. You came at just the right time." Delight appeared on Li Minggong's face as she beckoned him over. But even before he could step forward, golden radiance streaked toward them from the horizon, and Siwei frowned and said, "So fast." Ding Weizeng scanned the skies and immediately recognized the incoming force. He reached into his storage pouch and drew out a bright red staff, planting it firmly on the ground. Fine, intricate runes emerged beneath his crimson armor, crawling up his arm and gathering densely in his pupils. Ding Weizeng said, "It's the Sidu family." It was no surprise that Ding Weizeng recognized Sidu Mo. The Ding family had once been a powerful family in the Floating South territory and had frequent dealings with the Golden Tang Gate. As a trusted pillar of the family, Ding Weizeng had even shared a friendship with Sidu Ku. He raised his staff as a middle-aged man appeared in the sky, holding a golden ring in his hand. His face was slightly elongated and his brows thin. Gleaming gold hooks and rings hung from his body, and the feathered robe he wore was patterned with diamond-like motifs. He stood before the formation with his hands clasped behind his back. There was no doubt that this was Sidu Mo. Several Foundation Establishment Realm guest cultivators stood behind him, and at his side stood an elder, Sidu Baio, whose features bore a resemblance to Sidu Ku, the one once held in the underground prison. Sidu Mo did not utter a single extra word and simply commanded, "Attack." Instantly, torrents of dazzling light rained down on the grand formation with a thunderous roar. The Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators on the formation platform all turned pale, and Siwei staggered back a step, his face grim as he held the formation plate. The formation atop Floating South's main peak was among the finest in the Qi Cultivation Realm, yet it could not withstand the combined assault of several Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. If not for nearly every Qi Cultivation Realm cultivator in the Floating South territory being present to share the burden, that strike alone would have shattered the formation. However, sheer numbers alone could not guarantee they would hold. Otherwise, there would be no need for a foundation establishment realm formation at all. Even with ample mana, the formation would shatter in a few more blows. Ding Weizeng hastily rode the wind forward to buy time, shouting, "Master Situ, why do you trespass into floating south territory?" Situmo raised his brows and drew the golden blade at his waist. Fierce golden chi surged, coiling around him as white waves. He spoke in a smooth tone, "So it is you, Weizeng. You too are a cultivator of floating south. Since this territory is about to fall, why not surrender to my Golden Tang Gate? I can recommend you to train in the capital Immortal Dao. Your merits will be acknowledged and your future secured. There is no need to throw your life away here." Of course, the Golden Tang Gate dared not truly recruit Ding Weizeng directly, so the offer was made in the name of the capital Immortal Dao. But Ding Weizeng knew better. His family was still on the lake, and he could distinguish clearly between loyalty and betrayal. Not to mention the debt he owed Li Ziming, who had sought out 4 Taoist masters to heal his injury. He refused without hesitation, but at that very moment, he caught sight of Situmo's hand. Situmo pressed one hand against his blade while forming a hand seal with the other inside his robe. His ring finger crossed over his middle finger, hooking his index while the remaining fingers aligned. He smiled. "Go." A blade-sharp beam of golden light shot out from his sleeve, accompanied by a piercing shriek as golden chi plummeted downward. Ding Weizeng reacted swiftly, gritting his teeth and shouting, "Ha!" His shout transformed midair into a tiger's roar, shaking the forest and slightly halting the golden blade. Ding Weizeng locked his gaze on Situmo, who suddenly found his eyes drawn uncontrollably into the stare. A powerful force struck Situmo, forcing him back a step as golden stars danced before his eyes. That single step back slowed the golden blade, allowing Ding Weizeng to evade it. Yet the elder behind Situmo, Situbairo, who knew his gate master's temperament well, was already swinging a golden hammer straight at Ding Weizeng. Waves of golden chi poured down upon Ding Weizeng. Fortunately, true fire surged up beneath his feet as Li Minggong's 6-cornered scarlet flame lamp rushed to his side. The Purifeather radiant fire transformed into countless red and white plumes that blazed skyward, shielding him from harm. Li Minggong shouted, "Golden Tang Gate, you attack our territory without cause. Do you mean to challenge the authority of the Purple Mansion realm?" Situmo and the Li family had long been at odds, and he knew that the Li family would never spare his family whether they fought or not. He was eager for a conflict between the Li family and the capital Immortal Dao. The latter would give him a powerful backing. Though pleased with the turn of events, his tone remained cautious as he said, "You foolish girl. My Golden Tang Gate acts under the orders of a Taoist master of the capital Immortal Dao to take control of the floating cloud territory. What talk is there of attacking?" Even as he spoke, true fire and golden chi collided. True fire was the fire virtue most effective at refining metal. That was precisely why Li Xiaowei had chosen Li Minggong to defend this place. Since it was empowered by the 6-cornered scarlet flame lamp, the fire might not match the golden chi in raw mana, but it could repeatedly erode it. The remaining golden chi struck Ding Weizeng's Dharma body, ringing against it with a crisp ding-dang. Chapter 1090, The Battle of Golden Tang II. Situmo had already regained his composure. Drawing his blade, he said coldly, "Seize them at once." The 6 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators, led by Situbairo, immediately surrounded Ding Weizeng, while one split off to block Siwei. Situbairo even took out a golden command token that radiated brilliant light that formed a net of energy over Ding Weizeng. Though Ding Weizeng was skilled in combat, he was only in the mid-stage of the Foundation Establishment Realm and could not possibly withstand the combined assault of 6 opponents, especially with Situbairo, whose cultivation was on par with his own, among them. He was quickly forced onto the defensive, gritting his teeth as he struggled to hold his ground. While Ding Weizeng was caught in a perilous struggle, Li Minggong fared no better against Situmo. His blade techniques had overwhelmed her from the beginning, and the golden chi he unleashed spread like a chilling mist that bit into her skin. Li Minggong had only been in the Foundation Establishment Realm for a few years and was no match for Situmo. Fortunately, true fire refined metal, and her fire barely managed to hold back the golden chi with the aid of the 6-cornered scarlet flame lamp. Situmo's blade chi could only be blocked by her Dharma artifact directly. Resounding dong-dong impacts rang out. The 6-cornered scarlet flame lamp is a gift from the Golden Feather sect. It's sturdy enough. It shouldn't fail immediately. Li Minggong no longer had the luxury of worrying whether her Dharma artifact had sustained damage. The golden blade in midair had already curved back, and was now thrusting straight at her back. A chill spread across Li Minggong's back before the golden blade even reached her. She spat out a stream of flame from her crimson lips, barely forcing back the blade before her, then turned her lamp to block the incoming strike. Clang! A crisp sound rang out as sparks exploded in midair. The golden light retreated swiftly. Li Minggong let out a muffled groan, a deep gash now carved into her arm, revealing bone. Though the Golden Tang Gate had declined in talent, their spell arts remained formidable. This golden blaze saber strike was blindingly fast. Even though she had used her Dharma artifact to block in time, she had only managed to catch the edge of it with the artifact's body. The golden blade had been deflected, but still slashed her arm. The chilling poison of metal immediately sought to invade her body, but her true Fire Dao foundation surged and effortlessly dissolved it. Lifting her gaze, she saw Sidu Mo forming seals once more, brilliant golden light shining in his palm. He is no ordinary cultivator, thought Li Minggong. Li Minggong had already been wounded after only a few exchanges with Sidu Mo. If not for her true fire-restraining metal, her condition would have been far worse. Realizing the vast gap between herself and these veterans, she quickly retreated several steps and activated talismans to shield herself. But Sidu Mo's spell was complete within a breath. He raised his hand as if throwing something, and countless golden needles shot from his palm. They came in such dense swarms they hurt the eyes to behold, like 10,000 birds returning to their nest. They all stabbed down at her. I cannot hold back after all. Li Minggong understood she was no match. Her cultivation and spells were far inferior to these seasoned elders. The golden needles would kill her if they struck true. She had no choice but to pull something from her sleeve and hurl it into the air. A folding screen immediately appeared in midair. 8 panels each bore a different painting. Azure light rippled across its surface, and dark blue radiance streamed out like falling rain. It was the Chang'eming Profound Insight Screen. The Chang'eming Profound Insight Screen belonged to the Green Pine Dao lineage and was particularly effective against sects from Jiangnan. But since the capital Immortal Dao was unrelated to that lineage, Li Xiaowei had not carried it himself. It had been entrusted to Li Minggong precisely because the heavy abyssal gale ability of the Chang'eming Profound Insight Screen was exceptionally effective against the Golden Tang Gate. The ancient Dharma artifact erupted with tremendous power. Its dark azure glow spread across the sky, and tens of thousands of golden needles suddenly froze in midair, as if their throats had been seized. As the dark azure light rippled past, it even forced out 2 writhing golden blades from the air, squirming like earthworms and struggling wildly. Li Minggong was taken aback, a cold sweat breaking out on her back as she thought there was yet another strike. Without this Dharma artifact, those golden blades would have followed one after another, and my life would have been forfeit. She had only broken through to the Foundation establishment realm a few years ago and lacked much experience in combat, which explained why she was struggling so much. It was only thanks to her Dharma artifact that she had survived. Sidu Mo's expression finally darkened as he glanced at the artifact, muttering, "Heavy abyssal gale, what an overbearing Dharma artifact." Sidu Mo and Li Minggong broke off their exchange after several clashes, but Ding Weizeng had fared far worse. His dark red mana surged as he braced his staff against 2 golden spears. His eyes had turned entirely crimson. The Palace Sun Tiger's gaze was known for its deadly precision, so none dared meet his eyes, casting only spell arts at his body instead. He held 6 opponents at bay with just his Dharma body, leaving them unable to advance an inch. Sidu Bairo had taken a blow midway and still looked grim. Sidu Mo's eyes narrowed as he said, "What a formidable Palace Sun Tiger." With Ding Weizeng in peril, Li Minggong immediately activated the Golden Dao protective ability within the screen, slipping free from the golden needles and rushing to assist him. Li Minggong and Ding Weizeng joined forces. True Fire and Hengzhu, bolstered by an ancient Dharma artifact designed to counter Golden Tang Gate, were no laughing matter. Sidu Mo was the first to react, drawing his blade to intercept and shouting coldly, "Do not let them join forces." His reaction was lightning fast. He intercepted Li Minggong as he shouted, while Ding Weizeng had already shifted his position. The guest cultivators of Golden Tang exchanged a glance and shouted in unison, "Go!" Several streams of golden light burst from their hands. Sidu Bairo also produced the golden command token once again, releasing beams of light that restrained Ding Weizeng. In an instant, resistance closed in from above and below, left and right, sealing him within. Ha 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 ha. This only made Ding Weizeng laugh. His dark red pupils shifted slightly as he pressed one hand into the air before him and chanted, "Crimson Tiger flees. The king retreats from the hall, meals are cut, the self is chastised." amnesty is granted to all under heaven. He transformed into a gust of dark red wind, howling through the barriers around him as if they did not exist. The wind swirled once in the sky before landing beside Li Minggong, reforming into Ding Weizeng's figure. In that instant, everyone from Golden Tang Gate froze in shock. The turn of events had happened too quickly. Even Sidu Mo was momentarily stunned. He and Li Minggong reacted almost at the same time as they thought. The Palace Sun Tiger excels in battle, escapes imprisonment, shatters cages, charges through yin to transcend karma, and strikes through sight. The encirclement formed by Sidu Bio and the others already bore the intent of cage, and their combined efforts had shaped the form of imprisonment. The Palace Sun Tiger's art of piercing through yin to transcend karma countered this perfectly, since it resonated with the very core of the immortal foundation. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Sidu Bio's face turned pale, while Ding Weizeng's laughter showed no sign of stopping. Li Minggong, however, was the first to change expression, hastily steering the Chang'eming Profound Insight screen back. Siwei, high above, and Siwei was still fending off one of Golden Tang Gate's guest cultivators alone, but she was a step too late. How quick was Sidu Mo? He appeared beside Siwei in a surge of golden chi. Before the Chang'eming Profound Insight screen could arrive, he struck a palm against him. The blow caused Siwei to spit blood and sent him hurtling toward Golden Tang's forces. Sidu Mo even had the leisure to turn and block the incoming Dharma artifact, meeting it with a cold, unyielding gaze. And Siwei's immortal foundation was ordinary, his cultivation techniques mediocre, and he had been fully focused on dueling his opponent. How could he react in time? In the blink of an eye, he was caught within the encirclement of 6 cultivators and completely immobilized. Chapter 1091, Clash in the Wilderness. Sidu Mo was truly no ordinary man. Even after being restrained by true fire and targeted by the Chang'eming Profound Insight screen, and even after Ding Weizeng managed to escape, he still seized a fleeting opportunity to turn the tide. Li Minggong and her companion had failed to arrive in time. And Siwei managed only 3 counterattacks before being gravely wounded and captured. In the next moment, Sidu Mo's cold voice rang out as he shouted, "Attack the mountain." Sidu Mo removed a seal from his waist and tossed it into the air, where it transformed into a stone mountain and came crashing down upon the Chang'eming Profound Insight screen. Li Minggong recognized it immediately. It was a gift presented when Profound Peak Gate had forged an alliance with Golden Tang Gate. The Dharma artifact was not of a low grade. Li Minggong's mana consumption doubled as it pressed down. Sidu Mo drew his blade and stood before the two, while 5 cultivators descended behind him, heading straight for Floating South's main peak. Sidu Mo's experience in combat far surpassed that of his opponents. Although he could not defeat them outright, the mountain beneath their feet was not going anywhere. By remaining on the defensive and relying on the Dharma artifact, he managed to hold off both Li Minggong and Ding Weizeng. A thunderous boom soon followed. Boom. The grand formation beneath their feet shattered in just 2 strikes. The Li family cultivators were left trembling like helpless sheep before the Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. Li Minggong's pupils widened as Sidu Mo, still holding the severely injured Siwei, pressed the advantage and shouted, "Li Minggong, the floating cloud territory can no longer be held. I will release this man if you lead your people across the river. I swear I will not pursue you guys." However, Li Minggong did not waver. The radiance of her Dharma artifact grew even brighter, and Siwei gritted his teeth and his face flushed red, a sight that made both Ding Weizeng and Sidu Mo turn pale. Does he have a death wish? Sidu Mo, born of a prestigious family, immediately recognized that Siwei intended to fight to the death. Golden light flashed like lightning in his eyes, striking the center of Siwei's brow and scattering his mana. Yet in that brief instant of distraction, a tremendous force slammed into Sidu Mo. His Dharma robe flared to life as if on its own. It felt as though something had struck him head-on. The world spun wildly before his eyes, and he staggered back, nearly coughing up a mouthful of blood. But his will was far stronger than most. Even under such a sudden and brutal assault, he did not release the spell art he held. He dragged Siwei along as he skidded to a halt. When he focused his gaze, he saw that another figure now stood where there had been none before. It was a young man in a colorful feathered robe. His face was slightly rounded, his eyes were bright and clear, and the fine orange feathers at his temples marked him unmistakably as a demonic creature, a dawn rayfish. He hesitated for a moment. Several figures appeared atop Floating South's main peak. His forces had been pushed back and regrouped around him. Sidu Mo tossed the captive into his subordinate's hands and suddenly tilted his head back as a pitch-black shadow streaked past his jaw, leaving behind a trail of dark red blood. "You motherless bastard!" The vertical pupils of the hooked serpent emerged from the shadow as Li Wuxiao lunged at him with two black swords aimed at his ribs. Sidu Mo's feathered robe fluttered as he shifted back several steps to evade the strike. Golden chi surged across his body, flowing into his frame through his robes as his long blade shone with dazzling light. Below, a massive white ape revealed its true form as Li Chenghui, flickering in and out of sight, battled the Golden Tang Gate cultivators. Heavenly Glow, True Fire, and Zheng Metal clashed and intertwined across the floating South Territory, sending spiritual energy into chaotic surges. Terrified commoners stumbled into the forest, cowering on the ground and trembling. Wilderness. The vast wilderness was noticeably quieter than the utter chaos in the floating South Territory. An utterly confident man with golden eyes sat beneath heavenly light, locked in a tense standoff with several figures across the river from him. The group from the capital Immortal Dao stood shrouded in a veil of pale gray mist, with a massive brown stone stele carved with densely packed runes hovering above their heads. They were led by a man in a black Taoist robe, with a silk sash tied at his waist. Silver-white fabric lay between the two lapels, and black markings adorned both cheeks. He held a Taoist scripture in his hands. His attire, though unusual, carried a strange and compelling beauty. His high brows and deep-set eyes betrayed him as none other than Guan Gongxiao, chief disciple of the capital Immortal Dao. A cultivator at the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, he had only recently broken through to this level, but was already a master of spell arts. He was widely regarded as unmatched in the Dao. The wilderness stretched vast and long, and it was the home ground of the profound Peak Gate and the Li family. Their communication and defensive capabilities were far superior. Li Xiaowei had not appeared at the riverbank at first, and even the outermost defenses were sparse, leaving the area looking empty and exposed. But Guan Gongxiao was no fool. He had not charged recklessly into enemy territory, but instead ordered his forces to assault several strategic peaks first, ensuring both advance and retreat were possible. Li Xiaowei had thus stepped forward to block him, and the two sides grew locked in a stalemate along the river. The wilderness was vast, but Li Xiaowei refused to scatter the profound Peak Gate's forces across it. Most of the territory was defended only by Qi Cultivation Realm or even Embryonic Breathing Realm cultivators, with Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators stationed solely at critical points. Thus, the profound Peak Gate's main force were present here. The Kong family had 15 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators, and 9 of them led by Fu Yuezi himself. The rest were led by Li Xiaowei himself, joined by Qi Juyan, Li Wen, Gbuzhai, and Maiyashui, 5 in total. If they included the Kong family cultivators and the yet-to-arrive Li Chenghui, they numbered 15. Both sides had ample forces, though the capital Immortal Dao fielded even more as Guan Gongxiao, Gongsun Beifan, and others brought their number to 18. It was without question the largest battle since the great conflict between the northern and southern factions. Li Xiaowei was waiting for Li Chenghui, while Guan Gongxiao awaited reinforcements from the Golden Tang Gate. After a brief stalemate, the weather shifted in the east, and a surge of baleful qi shot into the sky, causing Kong Guxi's expression to change drastically. Li Xiaowei did not need to ask to know that profound Peak Gate's flanks had surely fallen. The capital Immortal Dao would not have concentrated all their forces here. There were no doubt numerous guest cultivators attacking from multiple directions. The wilderness is crisscrossed and exposed. Our family alone cannot hold it. The only viable method is to withdraw and meet the main force head-on, thought Li Xiaowei. The tension in the air thickened by the moment. The jade pendant at Li Xiaowei's waist grew warm. Li Chenghui was only seconds away. Heavenly light flared between his brows, and a surge of heavenly radiance and hidden light burst forth, streaking across the river. A stone stele immediately rose from the capital Immortal Dao side to block the radiant light. Neither side wasted a single word. The battlefield shifted from stillness to motion in an instant as bursts of mana flared across the field. Li Xiaowei thrust his halberd forward, and the first to react was none other than Gongsun Beifan, cloaked in a straw raincoat. Resolution flared in Gongsun Beifan's eyes as he drew his blade and charged. Guan Lingdi, on the other hand, took a step back, unwilling to face Li Xiaowei directly. She turned instead toward the soft persimmon Gbuzhai, clearly still haunted by their clashes in past years. Since this battle could bring death at any moment, she immediately backed down. Gongsun Beifan wanted to engage Li Xiaowei, but Qi Juyan did not give him the chance. The elegant, scholar-like man smiled faintly as luminous steps appeared beneath his feet one after another, drawing Gongsun Beifan into their formation. With Gongsun Beifan blocked before him, Guan Gongxiao's gaze shot forward like an arrow. The Taoist scripture in his hand stirred without wind, and as the halberd thrust toward him, torrents of river water surged from the pages, spiraling and swirling beneath his feet. Heavenly light shone down upon Li Xiaowei, piercing into Guan Gongxiao's eyes. Yet aside from the golden hue of his pupils, the man before Guan Gongxiao seemed unremarkable. Guan Gongxiao let out a cold, mocking laugh. Let's see just how mighty this so-called white Qilin truly is. Chapter 1092, Might of the Halberd Commander I. Guan Gongxiao was Yi Hui's personal disciple, and cultivated his master's most prized divine ability, South Chu waters. However, it resembled water virtue more than capital guard. Standing upon the ashen waters beneath the descending heavenly light, he drew back his hand and formed a seal. Go. He was clearly prepared. A bronze mirror shot out of his sleeve and swallowed the heavenly light in one breath, while his other hand released a sheet of runes. The runes manifested drifting white shadows, accompanied by profound chanting. A gust of wind and sand shook loose from Guan Gongxiao's sleeve, mingling with the shadows as they swept forward. The sandstorm seemed unimpressive, yet it pierced the bright yang heavenly light with unstoppable momentum. Li Xiaowei immediately recognized a natural counter to his family's radiant essence Dao lineage, and swiftly formed a seal as he said, "Heaven's patterns intersect, radiant yang punishment fire." 5 flames in ochre, pale yellow, gosling yellow, bright red, and vermilion surged downward in a sweeping cascade. Firelight surged into the sky, instantly suppressing the sandstorm as Li Xiaowei charged into the fray, sweeping his halberd in a wide arc. The heavenly light shone upon Li Xiaowei's halberd, staining it with a dark shadow. He practiced the armor cycle soul-refining halberd art, a halberd technique forged through the annihilation of sects. He had destroyed the royal court of Mount Yue when he was still in the embryonic breathing realm, thus earning entry into the technique. But though northern Mount Yue had a large population, it was merely a minor qi cultivation realm force. It was only enough for initiation. Later, when he exterminated Hidden Cloud Cave, a Jiangbei faction with many foundation establishment realm cultivators, the armor cycle soul-refining halberd art had advanced greatly. Dark shadows leaped from the halberd, causing the sounds of slaughter to echo. The halberd sent the waters of the river surging even before it struck. Guan Gongxiao, a spell art cultivator with years of battle experience in the Eastern Sea, knew he could not allow Li Xiaowei to close the distance. He pressed 2 fingers to his lips and blew forcefully. A solid sheet of white light billowed forth and gently deflected the halberd's sweeping strike. Guan Gongxiao had used this spell art against countless cultivators and paid it no mind until a chill crept up his back. He glanced behind him and saw a jet-black flame flickering in Li Xiaowei's hands. Clang, there was no time to ponder. Li Xiaowei's halberd technique was ferocious and swift. The second thrust was already aimed at his face. Guan Gongxiao had no choice but to block with another spell art. As he pushed back, another jet-black flame rose around Li Xiaowei, bringing the total to 2. A sense of unease crept into Guan Gongxiao's heart. As a direct disciple of a Purple Mansion realm cultivator, Guan Gongxiao had witnessed countless spell arts. The sight of Li Xiaowei's black flames told him, with near certainty, that they were a technique that continuously empowered the wielder. He knew he could not allow his opponent to sustain it uninterrupted. Guan Gongxiao immediately activated a Dharma artifact, and a black bell manifested behind him with a ringing chime. It turned once, projecting a gray curtain that swept forward. Li Xiaowei channeled his mana, and heavenly radiance, hidden light burst forth from the center of his brows to surge ahead. Though the black bell appeared strange, it was a genuine Capital Guard Dharma artifact. Unlike the previous cultivators Li Xiaowei had fought, who had crumbled after a single blow, this artifact let out a mournful cry as heavenly radiance, hidden light struck it, yet it held firm. Guan Gongxiao seized the moment to withdraw. After retreating just 2 steps, he activated his South Chu Water's immortal foundation, transforming his body into water imbued with mana and merging into the gray waters surging from his Taoist scripture. His figure reappeared on the other side. Once distance had been established, Guan Gongxiao formed hand seals while stealing a glance at the black flames on Li Xiaowei's body. They had not faded, but continued to burn fiercely, causing his brows to furrow as he thought, "I cannot tell what spell this is." The unknown was always the most fearsome. As he stepped back, Li Xiaowei also freed his hands, forming seals and extending his fingers. A ray of solar light leaped from his palm, surging forth with radiant fire. Supreme Yang Resonance Radiant Art. The technique was adaptable and had no fixed form. Li Xiaowei had simply used it, this time Supreme Yang Resonance Radiant Art, to restrain his opponent. Red and yellow flames danced beneath his feet as a small flag, bearing the image of a crimson sparrow, rose into the air and shot toward the gray waters. It was the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner. Guan Gongxiao's storm of wind and sand was merely a spell, rootless as duckweed. Even though radiant fire and radiant essence had no direct relation of dominance or submission, the storm was quickly eroded and swept aside as the banner arrived. Li Xiaowei seized the perfect moment, transforming into heavenly light and leaping in front of Guan Gongxiao. His halberd thrust forward, striking the gray curtain with a sharp, ringing sound. Clang! Guan Gongxiao's expression changed abruptly. Relying solely on the bell's feedback, he quickly realized the incredible strength behind the halberd blow. Earlier, he had dismissed it since he had the assistance of spells. But this one strike sent his mana plummeting, and dread crept into his heart. The halberd in his hand is likely an ancient Dharma artifact. His gaze swept quickly across the battlefield. His own side now held a full advantage. Among the Li family and Profound Peak Gate faction, only Fu Yuezi, who wielded a golden axe and a scholar-like figure, could still fight. The rest were little more than chickens and dogs, collapsing at the first touch. Many were already wounded, and relief flooded his chest as he thought, I just need to stall him. But in the span of that single thought, the gray curtain had already taken 3 halberd strikes, and its aura was starting to falter slightly. As a layer of black flame ignited on Li Xiaowei's body, Guan Gongxiao, unaware of the subtle transformation in his own mindset, formed another seal and cast another spell. Li Xiaowei also took in the state of the battlefield. His gaze swept the area, and he redirected his halberd. To everyone's surprise, he ignored Guan Gongxiao before him and turned to thrust at Gongsun Beifan instead. Although Gongsun Beifan's blade technique was exquisite, he was but a rogue cultivator. How could he match Qi Juyan, the direct scion of Changzhou Island? Qi Juyan silently cast several spell arts that left Gongsun trapped, unable to advance or retreat. The Everbright platform manifested and darted through the air, battering Gongsun until he was utterly disoriented. Now, when Li Xiaowei suddenly lunged at him, the blade cultivator paled in fright. Mana backlash made him cough blood, but he still drew his blade and turned to meet the attack, only to find the radiant halberd adjusting its arc mid-swing. His hasty strike hit nothing but air, leaving him even more off balance, and Li Xiaowei closed in from the side. He intends to fight 2 at once. How could Guan Gongxiao not understand? Humiliated beyond measure, fury surged within him, and his spell arts grew faster and more vicious. Qi Juyan, however, saw the situation clearly and withdrew to aid the Profound Peak Gate cultivators. Gongsun Beifan had no Profound Dao lineage. His long blade clashed with Li Xiaowei's halberd over several exchanges. He too thought the surging black flames around Li Xiaowei to be strange, but Guan Gongxiao was too focused on his own spellcasting to warn him. Guan Gongxiao could only force out, "Ha!" A burst of crimson light shot from Guan Gongxiao's mouth. Li Xiaowei's expression grew solemn as he forcibly swung his halberd back and silently activated Supreme Yang Resonance Radiant Art, shaping it into a celestial screen before him. The crimson light was extremely sharp. However, it hesitated briefly against the Supreme Yang Resonance Radiant Art before shattering it into pieces. As Li Xiaowei blocked with his halberd, he immediately sensed something was off. This crimson light is a refined art of the Capital Guard Dao lineage, built up over time. My Supreme Yang Resonance Radiant Art was a reflexive response, yet it could still slow it slightly. The Supreme Yang Dao might have a subtle restraining effect on the Capital Guard Dao. Li Xiaowei had used the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner earlier, and the Capital Guard Dao had showed no fear of radiant fire. That meant the key lay in the Supreme Yang Dao. Delight stirred in Li Xiaowei's heart. This is quite a significant discovery. Chapter 1093, Might of the Halberd Commander, II. Li Xiaowei had always faced a disadvantage in his battles against the Capital Immortal Dao. The reputation of the bright Yang Dao lineage was too well known, and any cultivator with a Dao lineage inheritance understood that radiant essence restrained bright Yang. Guan Gongxiao had even prepared a radiant essence sandstorm for this purpose, and who knew what other trump cards. But the Capital Guard Dao lineage was so ancient that many cultivators did not even know it existed, making its weaknesses difficult to exploit. Now that he had uncovered this truth, whether by Dharma artifact or spell art, he would always have a countermeasure. As that thought flashed through his mind, a dull thud rang out as the Da Sheng halberd swung high. Li Xiaowei finally coughed up a mouthful of blood, while radiant light shimmered across his chest, and the scales of his Yuan armor shifted restlessly. Yuan had been commissioned by Li Xuanfeng years ago and forged with the full effort of the cultivators of the Azure Pond sect. One of its functions was to assist Li Xiaowei in traversing with heavenly light, enhancing his footwork until it was ghost-like. Moments ago, when he had used heavenly light to move, it was thanks to both flowing sun refraction and Yuan. Yuan also had another function. It could enhance mana and resist spell arts. Except for spell arts based on radiant essence, all other spell arts striking the wearer would have their force distributed across the armor's 6,200 scales, granting them tremendous protection. It was thanks to this armor that Li Xiaowei had escaped Fudu's grasp time and again. Now, even after taking Guan Gongxiao's spell head-on, he merely spat out a mouthful of blood. That pale blood rose into the air, spreading a strange peony-like fragrance. When he saw Li Xiaowei injured, Guan Gongxiao secretly sighed in relief, but then noticed a dark mountain rising in the sky. Someone from Profound Peak Gate has fallen. Li Xiaowei had noticed it even sooner. It wasn't merely that someone from Profound Peak Gate had fallen. 2 guest cultivators had already been grievously wounded and been forced to retreat. His own forces had dwindled to 12, all of them injured. Fu Yuezi and Cui Juyan were barely holding the line, each struggling to restrain 4 opponents, and were only just managing to keep the situation from collapsing. The capital Immortal Dao had yet to suffer any serious injuries. Just then thunder roared across the heavens, silver ripples spreading as crackling lightning surged into view. Li Chenghui rode the thunder as he fought 2 opponents while advancing. Cui Juyan, glancing up from below, finally understood why Li Chenghui had been so delayed. The capital Immortal Dao has more people intercepting him. The 2 opponents Li Chenghui faced were both direct descendants, not guest cultivators, so he was under immense pressure. It was clear that he would not be able to free himself. Li Xiaowei briefly glanced across the field, deflecting the spell arts of Guan Gongxiao and Gongsun Beifan, before sending the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner streaking off to intercept Guan Lingdi. When she saw the ferocious flames bearing down on her, Guan Lingdi let out an incredulous laugh. After a brief moment of hesitation, she turned to the people beside her and ordered, "You and you, go stop him first." The direct lineage cultivators on either side were clearly reluctant to face Li Xiaowei and hesitated. However, an old man, Guan Can, stepped out from behind them, releasing Cui Juyan to intercept the banner. Li Xiaowei shook his head at the sight, the flames around his body flickering even brighter. The capital Immortal Dao may be a great Dao lineage of the Eastern Sea with powerful forces, but their command is far from unified. Guan Can, a cultivator at the late Foundation Establishment realm, joined the 2 to hold Li Xiaowei in place. Riding a current of water, he sped forward and drew over 10 interlinked cold iron rings from his sleeve. The aged cultivator squinted as he inspected them, then gently tossed the Dharma artifact forward. Seizing the moment while Li Xiaowei was distracted by Guan Gongxiao's radiant essence sandstorm, he chanted loudly, "Light covering 5,000 kilometers, green overturning 1,000 peaks, summon the pit water and bind all obstacles." His immortal foundation, Grieving River Departure, roared to life and resonated with the cold iron rings suspended in midair. Waterlight gathered within them, bursting forth as torrents of water that twisted into cords and lashed at Li Xiaowei. Li Xiaowei retreated on a path of heavenly light, but the cold iron rings were not ordinary artifacts. The water cords they unleashed were incredibly fast, coiling rapidly around his weapon. This old man is no ordinary foe, likely an elder of the capital Immortal Dao. The water cords dispersed and reformed endlessly. They were impossible to dispel. Empowered by late Foundation Establishment realm mana and the strength of an immortal foundation, they became the most difficult threat for Li Xiaowei to deal with. Guan Gongxiao and Gongsun Beifan were of little concern with Yuan and Supreme Yang Resonance Radiant Art protecting him. What he feared was precisely this softness overcoming hardness. He hurriedly channeled his mana, recalling the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner that had flown out. He intended to match Radiant Fire against Pit Water. Guan Gongxiao reacted swiftly, and his black bell was about to intercept, but a deep voice rang out, "Descend." Another Dharma artifact. Guan Gongxiao froze for a moment as a brilliant radiant light surged into the sky. Clouds of many colors blossomed overhead, and the swirling mist parted to reveal a heavenly gate descending from above, its towering corner tower stabbing at his eyes with searing light. He cursed under his breath, "I forgot about the Li family's suppressive immortal foundation." The capital Immortal Dao possessed a similar immortal foundation, Eastern Feather Mountain, which ultimately manifested as a spell divine ability. Yet even so, such immortal foundations wielded immense power at the Foundation establishment realm and could seize a decisive advantage. Two white bastions crashed down onto his carefully nurtured Black Bell Dharma artifact, crushing it so forcefully that he spat blood. It was the Heaven-venerating Gate. Li Xiaowei's attainment of the Radiant Essence scripture had always been rooted in the Heaven-venerating Gate. At first, he had mistaken it for the Radiant Origin Pass and thought it quite different from Li Ziming's path. It was only after his own family had a Purple Mansion Realm cultivator that he understood the true renown of this immortal foundation. Li Xiaowei's figure appeared on top of the descending gate, and Guan Can's cold iron rings were suppressed beneath it. At last, the old man nodded, shook his sleeves, and descended from midair, clutching talismans to continue the fight. Though the Heaven-venerating Gate was of exceptionally high grade, it was still ultimately an immortal foundation focused on suppression. Li Xiaowei's combat experience far surpassed that of Li Ziming in his day, and he had deliberately refrained from revealing his immortal foundation in the beginning. Now, he had suppressed his enemy's two most formidable Dharma artifacts in one stroke. With the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner freed and recalled to his side, he faced his foes beneath the radiant light of the Heavenly Gate. His immortal foundation and banner resonated with one another, and though the situation remained perilous, he was holding his ground. It had to be said that with Guan Can entering the fray, he was now facing two late-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators and one mid-stage. Two of the late-stage ones were even direct descendants of the Immortal Gate. Even the famed Chuoba Changyuan of the past had faced nothing greater than this. Although Guan Can was a step below the Li Zijia of old, Guan Gongxiao was far superior to Yu Yuwei, and Gongsun Beifan was leagues ahead of Kuan Yi. Unfortunately, Li Xiaowei's cultivation was slightly weaker. Chuoba Changyuan could suppress 3 opponents at once, whereas Li Xiaowei was fighting on the edge of danger and occasionally spitting pale blood. Any Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator of real ability was never easy to kill. Those who had refined their Dharma body or possessed extensive amounts of mana could even hold off many for a time. The 3 pressed Li Xiaowei so hard that he could only focus on defense. It was clearly a battle they were winning inch by inch, yet Guan Gongxiao's frown only deepened. The reason was simple. The black flames around Li Xiaowei had already surged skyward. Do not take his halberd head-on. Guan Gongxiao shouted the warning sharply. Gongsun Beifan knew the words were meant for him, as half of those black flames had been forged by his own strikes. But he cultivated the blade. How else could he fight but by clashing blades? He couldn't simply stand still and let himself be cut down. Gritting his teeth, Gongsun Beifan exchanged a few more blows and prepared to withdraw. But Li Xiaowei, pressing forward under the assault of 2 opponents, pursued him relentlessly. At last, the black flames rose high enough to flow like a current. A faint smile appeared on Li Xiaowei's blood-stained face as he drew a deep breath, and the flames streamed into his nose and mouth. It was none other than the Armor Cycle soul-refining halberd art. The unease in Guan Gongxiao's heart was finally confirmed. Li Xiaowei raised his halberd once more, and he exhaled a gout of black flame from blood-flecked lips and teeth. The moment it left his mouth, it expanded rapidly, scattering sparks in all directions. Boom! A torrent of thick, shadowy flame erupted forth. Li Xiaowei turned his head, his eyes glinting with a hint of ferocity. The gaze sent a chill into Guan Gongxiao's heart, deeper than any cold or sinister stare ever could. Li Xiaowei's surging black flames were reflected in Guan Gongxiao's pitch-black pupils. 2 arms, formed entirely of black fire, burst out from beneath his ribs, sending waves of black radiance surging toward the sky. The black flames he had exhaled condensed into 2 halberds, which fell into the grasp of those shadowy arms. As the arms slowly straightened and the halberds angled toward the ground, Guan Gongxiao's throat grew dry at the sight. What sort of devil technique is this? Isn't his family supposed to be orthodox? We're the cultivators of the Eastern Sea, muttered Guan Gongxiao. Chapter 1094, Death by Roar Eye. The capital Immortal Dao to which Guan Gongxiao belonged was itself an Eastern Sea Dao lineage, and he had studied more demonic techniques than the Li family had ever seen. The Armor Cycle soul-refining halberd art that Li Xiaowei cultivated originated in the Liang dynasty, and was, truthfully, not far removed from a devil technique. But no sooner had that thought crossed his mind than black flames rained down on him, and the Desheng halberd thrust forward with sudden speed. Although the heavenly light on the halberd was blocked by his small mirror Dharma artifact, the surging black shadow was clearly not that easy to handle. He quickly formed a seal and released a burst of white light. This white light, known as evening white origin dispersal, was designed specifically to counter cultivators skilled in artifact combat. It dissolved sharp energy and repelled Dharma artifacts. Guan Gongxiao had always found this spell invincible in battle, and it had indeed helped him resist the halberd strikes earlier. Yet when the white light was released this time and rose before the halberd, a surge of black flame erupted from the weapon, causing the light to collapse like air leaking from a punctured bladder. The Dasheng halberd broke straight through, and the heavenly light upon it slipped free from the mirror artifact's restraining field, shining brilliantly. Clang! Caught off guard, Guan Gongxiao yanked his Taoist scripture before him. Its pages turned without wind, spraying streams of pure qi that barely managed to hold back the halberd. Guan Can and Gongsun Beifan broke out in a cold sweat as they hurried to assist. But Li Xiaowei, having finally seized the initiative, had no intention of relinquishing it. The Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner surged at full power, sending 5 kinds of radiant fire crashing down. The heavenly light pouring from the celestial gate pulsed as well, and the 2 pinned Guan Can in place. On the other side, Gongsun Beifan, skilled in the blade, had barely stepped forward when a black shadow halberd ripped through the air and clashed against his blade. The rain-cloaked blade cultivator exchanged over a dozen blows in a heartbeat, then glanced upward to see that same shadow-wreathed man forcing Guan Gongxiao down with a single halberd strike. His face flushed as he teetered on the verge of falling from the sky. Gongsun Beifan was nearly the pinnacle of what a grassroots rogue cultivator could achieve. Ordinary family cultivators in the Foundation establishment realm were no match for him, yet he still bore the common flaw of rogue cultivators, ignorance of spell arts and shallow Taoist attainment. He had clawed his way up relying on a single blade technique. He could hold his own against anyone, but he lacked any means of breaking through a stalemate. Perhaps if he served the capital Immortal Dao as a guest cultivator for 50 or 60 years, he might have transformed himself and soared like a great peng. But for now, he remained a rogue cultivator, nothing more. Looking at the state of the battlefield, Gongsun Beifan knew that he would face harsh reprimands even if he returned alive. However, if anything happened to Guan Gongxiao, the consequences would be far worse. Guan Can would surely be fine regardless, but what did Gongsun Beifan himself have to rely on? He had no choice now but to fight with everything he had, so he slapped his storage pouch and 3 scarlet pills shot out, landing in his mouth. Biting his tongue, he spat a mouthful of blood essence onto his blade, causing lines of runes to flare instantly to life. In that brief instant, Li Xiaowei narrowed his eyes and said with a faint smile, so it was merely a support Dharma artifact. Guan Gongxiao had always presented himself with a Taoist scripture, and anyone who fought him would naturally be wary of it as his trump card. But Li Xiaowei, who had struck unexpectedly with a halberd strike, had forced him into a desperate situation and discovered that the scripture was nothing more than a support Dharma artifact used for casting spells and releasing water techniques. The black bell is his true weapon, and it's already suppressed beneath the gate, thought Li Xiaowei. His halberd flipped and thrust forward, breaking through the scripture's protection and driving straight in. Heavenly light surged along the Dasheng halberd, its scorching heat igniting flames across Guan Gongxiao's face with a sizzling hiss. Not good. Guan Can turned out to be the most surprised. The old man had clearly never imagined that the young gate heir he placed such high hopes on would truly have his life endangered by a single halberd strike. Startled out of simply observing, he immediately began gathering a spell in his mouth. At that critical instant, a white halo burst from Guan Gongxiao's body, and the runes on his chest lit up, repelling all the heavenly light and flames from his face. A metallic clang rang out as the barrier stopped the Dasheng halberd just in time. Li Xiaowei was not the least bit surprised. A man of Guan Gongxiao's status could not possibly be without protective life-saving items. Even he himself possessed 3 such treasures, but he had not missed his mark. The halberd slid upward at blinding speed and slammed into the mirror Dharma artifact. Guan Gongxiao might have escaped injury thanks to the talisman, but his blood surged violently, leaving him no time to react. The Dharma artifact struggled twice before being pulled back and pinned beneath the heavenly gate by a sweeping strike of the Dasheng halberd. But before Li Xiaowei could press his advantage anymore, he was forced to turn his halberd as Gongsun Beifan broke free of the entangling black shadows and furiously charged in. A sharp clash rang out, forcing Li Xiaowei back a step. He was slightly surprised, but quickly understood that the man before him was fighting with his life on the line. He locked the Dasheng halberd with his long blade as 2 waves of black shadow spread outward. The halberd pulled back and swept in from the side, but Gongsun Beifan, having taken his pills, showed no fear. 3 water dragon shadows surged from his back, blocking the black flames from either side. At the same moment he shouted, "Elder." Prompted by the call, Guan Can realized this was his best chance. The spell art he had been accumulating surged from his mouth and transformed into the essence of pit water in midair as it swam rapidly toward its target. But heavenly light flared between Li Xiaowei's brows, and Gongsun Beifan's hair stood on end. Heavenly radiance, hidden light, was not moving to block the essence of pit water at all. It was heading straight for him. Gongsun Beifan had risked his life so that Yi Hui's Dao would not watch him die with cold eyes, but he was not prepared to throw his life away outright. He immediately retreated and raised his long blade. At the same moment, Li Xiaowei's Desheng halberd shifted with practiced ease, like an ambush long prepared, and drove straight toward the essence of pit water. Why go to such pointless lengths? The long blade in Gongsun Beifan's hands was struck by heavenly radiance, hidden light, and an immense force slammed into him. If not for his mastery of blade technique and skilled defense, that single blow might have toppled him. Even so, the blade's spine burned with heat, nearly forcing blood from his lips, and confusion stirred within him. But a moment later, both Gongsun Beifan and Guan Can understood. When the essence of pit water struck the black flames surrounding Li Xiaowei's halberd, white vapor surged forth and split into several streams that scattered in different directions. After retreating several paces, they dispersed further, flowing southward in disarray. Guan Can's long-prepared spell art had disintegrated like snow melting under the blazing sun. What is the meaning of this? Gongsun Beifan stared in shock, while Guan Can's expression turned gray. Guan Gongxiao, the young gate heir, finally caught his breath and shouted, "That black flame is the great Liang's boundless essence spell." Guan Can understood immediately. When he saw Li Xiaowei wreathed in surging black fire, a sense of dread welled up within him. Boundless essence transforms pit water into radiant fire. Refined through the Liang martial era, it can now suppress, merge, and subdue. This just became troublesome, thought Guan Can. Li Xiaowei himself was astonished by the power of this halberd strike. The armor cycle soul-refining halberd art he practiced contained a hidden ability to break spells, which was how he had earlier forced out Guan Gongxiao's trump card so suddenly. Now a realization flashed through his mind. I only intended to use the spell-breaking ability within this technique, yet boundless essence can even shatter pit water. Excellent, excellent. Now that he had such an advantage, he immediately drew his halberd back and swung it around, ignoring the crimson light Guan Gongxiao spat out in a desperate attempt to relieve the pressure, and thrust straight toward Gongsun Beifan. Everyone on the field now understood the situation clearly, except Gongsun Beifan. He only knew that Guan Can's spell art had been inexplicably shattered. His astonishment had yet to fade before the Desheng halberd bore down upon him, and shock gave way to sheer terror. Chapter 1095, Death by Roar II. Li Xiaowei refused to relent. The heavenly radiance, hidden light between his brows grew ever stronger, condensing into a tangible white beam that locked Gongsun Beifan in place. If Gongsun Beifan tried to draw back his blade in retreat, his head would be blown apart. A dull thud echoed as the straw raincoat Gongsun Beifan had forged himself at the Qi Cultivation Realm tour with a sharp rip. Blood gushed from his mouth and evaporated before it even touched the ground. The 3 flood dragons were swept apart by a single halberd strike and erased under the heavenly light, sending Gongsun Beifan plummeting like a bird with broken wings. Black flames surged from his falling body, and Guan Can's eyelids twitched violently as he thought, that blade cultivator practices Jing Dragon King, which also belongs to the Pit Water Dao. After that halberd strike, he'd be suffering indeed. Having forcibly brought Gongsun Beifan down, Li Xiaowei could not evade Guan Gongxiao's spell. The 2 fiery arms beneath his ribs thrust their halberds to block the crimson light, but he still took the blow with a muffled grunt, causing the scales across his body to ripple. He swung his blood-streaked halberd around and swept his gaze across the field, sending a chill down Guan Can's spine. He's coming for me. The fallen Gongsun Beifan was no different from a corpse. Now that Li Xiaowei knew his armor cycle soul-refining halberd art countered pit water, he naturally sought to use strength against weakness. Swallowing blood, he stepped onto heavenly light and advanced, terrifying Guan Can into hastily discarding the flickering Yang radiant red sparrow banner still suspended in midair. With a sweep of his sleeve, he released several dark shadows. The shadows shifted and transformed before him, but Li Xiaowei did not spare them a glance. His grand-veined golden eyes glowed, piercing through the illusion in an instant. He stepped forward into the void, closing the distance in a single stride. At this critical moment, Guan Gongxiao finally rushed close enough. His body, now transformed into gray water, surged within the current Guan Can had summoned. He pulled a copper coin from his sleeve and flicked it lightly. Zheng metal brings control, protect and guard me. Although Guan Gongxiao could not match Li Xiaowei in battle, his reactions were far from slow. He had already deduced from their brief exchange that Li Xiaowei possessed a spell-breaking ability. Thus, without even casting a spell, he threw out a metal virtue Dharma artifact. A massive golden shield burst into existence in the air. It took the full force of a halberd strike wrapped in raging black flames, producing a thunderous roar before its light dimmed. But the two men had held their ground. When he saw his opponent bring out a metal virtue Dharma artifact, Li Xiaowei immediately activated the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner. Radiant fire surged downward, using fire to refine metal, while his halberd swept horizontally to extinguish the ongoing spells. The two direct disciples of the capital Immortal Dao suddenly found themselves caught in a dilemma. The reason was simple. Their Dharma artifacts were pinned beneath the heavenly gate and could not move, while Li Xiaowei's halberd strikes had a spell-breaking ability. Guan Gongxiao was holding on, but Guan Can was in deep trouble as his face contorted with pain. After barely a dozen exchanges, the two were still trapped, unable to advance or retreat. The metal virtue Dharma artifact was already sizzling and turning a glowing red. It was clearly on the verge of collapse. Guan Gongxiao finally grit his teeth and spat. This demonic wretch came prepared with boundless essence spell arts tailored against our gate. Gongsun Beifin's incompetence has brought us to this state. What are we to do now? The capital Immortal Dao's forces were still far stronger than those of the Li family. Even without Elder Guan Can, they retained a significant advantage. Guan Gongxiao's only aim was to stall Li Xiaowei. He had been confident that his side would have the last laugh and had no desire to call for more reinforcements. Guan Can immediately understood the young gate heir's meaning. The task of risking one's life should fall to him, the elder, not Guan Gongxiao. His voice turned grave as he replied, "Rest assured, young master. This old man still has strength left to give." The old man drew several talismans from his sleeve and pressed them to his flanks and cheeks. Biting his tongue, he spat blood essence into his palms. Li Xiaowei had just finished burning his way through the golden shield, and his golden eyes turned coldly toward them. Older cultivators always had their own methods. Like Yu Yuwei and Jiang Huzi, they had little lifespan remaining and no longer feared exhausting their essence or missing their chance at the Purple Mansion realm, so they were not to be underestimated. Li Xiaowei immediately moved his halberd, thrusting it toward the spell forming in the elder's hands. Guan Gongxiao flipped through his Taoist scripture, activating the South Chu waters. Several spells were unleashed at full force in hopes of stalling the raging black flames even a Mana surged wildly as Guan Can spat out the essence of pit water and shouted, "Pit metal fourfold water chains, bind." Streams of pale gray water chains gushed from his sleeves, supple and serpentine. They raced swiftly along the halberd's shaft to coil around Li Xiaowei's arms. He spun his halberd and shattered them, but they immediately reformed. Though their glow dimmed slightly, they rapidly recovered under the elder's immense mana. This is not a simple pit water spell art, thought Li Xiaowei. Guan Can's expression turned grim. Fueled by his reckless torrent of mana, the water chains became both flexible and unyielding, binding the Dusheng halberd tightly in place. Guan Gongxiao rejoiced at the sight. His spells had finally proven useful. Once he gathered them, he hurled them at Li Xiaowei's back. Clang. Li Xiaowei struggled fiercely as Guan Can's face turned pale. The blow landed squarely on his back, staggering him. The water chains surged upward along the halberd, binding the two spectral arms beneath his ribs. The scene quickly grew intense. The elder burned through the last of his essence, exerting all his strength to restrain the fierce young man wreathed in black flames, while the young gate heir in Taoist robes gathered spell after spell to suppress the demonic blaze. The capital Immortal Dao spells were not only powerful, but also agonizing when they landed. Li Xiaowei's momentum began to drop within just a few exchanges, while Guan Can's body grew gaunt and withered. Guan Gongxiao realized how terrifyingly tough the armor on Li Xiaowei's body was and changed his target to his face. Though his Dharma robe shielded his entire body, the protection there was thinner. His strike split Li Xiaowei's brow open, exposing white bone. The elder shouted, "Force his immortal foundation to return to defend him." If this continued, Guan Can would die first. Their goal had never been to kill Li Xiaowei outright, but to stall him. Once the pit metal chain rings and capital Dao Bell Dharma artifacts were released, stopping him would no longer be an issue. Yet the instant the elder opened his mouth and his focus wavered, the long-silent Li Xiaowei suddenly exploded into motion. Strength surged through both his arms, snapping the water chains taut. Guan Can instinctively tried to pull them back, but Li Xiaowei jerked once, then relaxed his grip to lunge forward at terrifying speed. Not good. That sudden lunge allowed Li Xiaowei to not only evade Guan Gongxiao's crimson light, but also close the distance in a single step and appear right before Guan Can. The elder saw a face before him, pale bone showing through and streaked with blood, suddenly magnified in an instant. His reflexes were swift, and he immediately thrust forward 2 water shields to block the incoming hands. For a moment, everything seemed to slow. Guan Can stared as countless bright white scales appeared on Li Xiaowei's neck. Bloodshot veins spread through those golden eyes, twisted with unbearable pain. His hands slammed into the shields, producing a harsh creaking sound. A final, fleeting thought surfaced in Guan Can's mind. Could Li Xiaowei truly be the reincarnation of the White Qilin? In the next instant, Li Xiaowei bared his pale teeth and let out a roar that shook the air itself. Roar. Guan Can had no time to even shut his eyes. The skin on his face tore apart and flew off in fragments, vanishing almost instantly. Veins, blood, and cartilage peeled away one by one. In the blink of an eye, every scrap of flesh from the elder's head separated from his face and scattered in all directions. Only a bare white skull remained atop his neck. Only then did a white protective barrier burst from his body. Blood sprayed from the ears of the nearby Guan Gongxiao from the force of that roar. When his eyes fell on the skull beneath the shimmering shield, all composure left him, and he shouted shrilly, "Reinforcements, now." Chapter 1096, A Scene of Ruin I. The roar thundered through the air, muffled like thunder before a storm, and the cultivators battling over the river all faltered in the same moment. The first to look up was Cui Juyan. He wielded the ever-bright platform, an immortal foundation of the bright Yang Dao that bound and pulled. As a direct descendant of Changzhu, he commanded the heavenly light Changzhu had studied for centuries. Not even Li Xiaowei could rival him in the art of controlling heavenly light. Radiance streamed from his sleeves, dazzling, scorching, pushing and pulling as he toyed with the 4 before him. None of them could even touch the hem of his robe. He alone remained uninjured among the Li family cultivators. Cui Juyan's face had remained calm as still water, yet the roar struck his ears like a thunderclap, and the heavenly light in his grasp nearly slipped away. He looked up sharply and saw the white scales rising flake by flake along Li Xiaowei's neck. His expression grew complicated as he unconsciously took a step forward. When he stopped himself, his heavenly light loosened for a brief moment. An enemy guest cultivator seized the opening and swept the light aside to close in. Cui Juyan reacted swiftly, shifting his footwork to dissolve the attack, but his movements grew tighter as he was drawn back into bitter combat. Guan Can's skull was facing forward as the ground beneath him split open and rivers surged out, gurgling as pale black pit water flowed. Li Xiaowei's gaze lingered briefly on his figure, and the scaled neck made a strange swallowing motion. In the next instant, he vanished from where he stood, ripples of heavenly light spreading as he reappeared before Guan Gongxiao. The blood-red lines in his eyes and the white scales on his neck had vanished, leaving only a face covered in wounds. Guan Gongxiao, however, was desperately driving his spell art, crimson light flashing as his cry for help still echoed in the air, "Come quickly to my aid." The cry rang out, and the fierce formation of the capital Immortal Dao immediately fell into disarray. People tried to break free and rush over from all directions. The guest cultivators, elders, direct descendants all showed signs of coming to his aid. Li Xiaowei thrust his halberd with all his strength, shattering the crimson light Guan Gongxiao spewed, and heard a deep shout roll across the sky. When Yang reaches its apex, 6 thunders are born. It was Li Chenghui. Li Chenghui's strength was considerable and his cultivation deep. He had broken through to Foundation Establishment realm, even before Li Ziming had entered seclusion, and after more than a decade, he was already capable of challenging mid-stage cultivators. Yet breaking through required years of seclusion, and he had spent those years following Li Xiaowei everywhere, filling in gaps and putting out fires. He had no time to withdraw and cultivate. By the time Li Ziming emerged from seclusion, Li Chenghui had long been ready to step into the mid-stage at any moment, but as pressure from the Mifan III sects mounted, he devoted all his focus to his thunder arts. Capital Immortal Dao, after all, was a gate from the eastern sea. Of the 2 direct descendants battling him above the river, one wielded pit water and the other true fire. The sect had clearly taken him into account, since the two they sent to block him were not particularly afraid of thunder. At that moment, silver-white lightning exploded, and blazing light surged violently. The two opponents took the full force of his strike and were forced to retreat. Li Chenghui's ability to seize an opening was formidable. Using the brief distraction from his words, he fully activated the six-fold profound thunder punishment tokens. He shot through the thunderous cascade, stepping on lightning and arriving before Guan Gongxiao and his companion in an instant. The instant the thunder roared, Li Xiaowei lifted his head, and a beam of heavenly radiance, hidden light burst from the center of his brow. Guan Gongxiao no longer had the luxury to deal with Li Chenghui. One hand held up a talisman and the other formed a seal. The radiant essence sandstorm rose again to meet the light. Guan Gongxiao's sandstorm was naturally no match for heavenly radiance, hidden light, but it was enough to hold it back for a moment, especially since there was some restraining interplay between them. However, even if he managed to defuse the immediate crisis, he was not relieved. Beside him, Li Chenghui suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a brilliant white point of light. It was the purple talisman origin light secret technique. The point of light expanded in an instant. Guan Gongxiao barely managed to lift his head high as the talisman in his other hand flared, and a thunderous boom followed. Boom! A circular wave of white light rippled through the air, its brilliance sweeping across the river. Waters surged and stones tumbled as the white light swelled and transformed into a purple thunder cascade pouring down from the sky. Guan Gongxiao's shield dissolved rapidly within the thunderfall. The young master of capital Immortal Dao truly carried many treasures. Still, even though the stray arcs of lightning only brushed against him twice, a long halberd wreathed in raging black flames was already thrusting toward him. Guan Gongxiao gritted his teeth and broke free from the lightning's grip. He circulated the South Chu waters, scattering into countless streams of ashen water and moving within the currents conjured by his Taoist scripture. But escaping was far from easy. Guan Gongxiao had been grazed. His back was scorching hot and his Taoist robe sizzling as it burned. He knew Li Xiaowei's perception technique could pierce his evasive maneuvers in moments, so he emerged from the edge of the water and charged toward the nearest person. The nearest form of aid was a guest cultivator of the capital Immortal Dao, square-faced and big-nosed. He had been hurrying over with wood virtue radiance gathered in his hand, yet before he could even reach Guan Gongxiao, a long halberd wreathed in fierce black flames came hurtling toward him. The guest cultivator dared not intercept it. His spirit wind stopped abruptly as he retreated a step, leaving Guan Gongxiao to fend for himself. The young master fumed with rage, but fortunately Guan Lingdi, who had fought Li Xiaowei before, had been watching from afar. A white dart intercepted the halberd with a ringing clang, forcing it upward. Guan Gongxiao quickly hurled out wind and sand to scatter the heavenly light, allowing him to slip through as water. Li Xiaowei finally withdrew his halberd, while Li Chenghui used thunder to block the two enemies rushing in to entangle them. The battle over the river ground to a halt as the combatants gradually separated. A pale Guan Gongxiao reappeared on the far side of the river. The cultivators of the capital Immortal Dao also withdrew one by one and gathered beside him. Since the capital Immortal Dao held the advantage, retreating was not difficult. Killing Guan Gongxiao was entirely impossible. Yi Hui and Li Ziming were both in the Great Void, and there was no reason to slay the enemy's young master in combat unless the conflict escalated to the Purple Mansion realm. The Li family absolutely did not wish for this matter to escalate to the level where a Purple Mansion realm cultivator would intervene. Li Xiaowei had already broken through the suppression of 3 opponents, crippled Gongsun Beifan, and slain Guan Can, yet still had strength to spare. The outcome of this battle was already all but decided. Although the Li family's strength was inferior and its position was precarious, the capital Immortal Dao could no longer find anyone capable of stopping Li Xiaowei. Purple Mansion realm direct descendants like Guan Gongxiao and Li Xiaowei entering the ranks of guest cultivators would be like tigers loosed among sheep, enough to turn the tide of battle. And that scholar of the bright Yang Dao, he is not simple either. All these years, it was not just our sect paying a heavy price. The Li family too has been preparing in secret. Having escaped danger, Guan Gongxiao's heart steadied. He swept a heavy gaze across Li Xiaowei and the others, then touched the jade pearl bracelet hidden in his sleeve. Only 3 of the 10 jade pearls had shattered, which brought him some small comfort. Guan Gongxiao reassured himself. At the very least, the Li family of Shanji Prefecture and Profound Peak Gate can no longer contain us. We secured 7 locations, crossed the river into the wilderness, and occupied several footholds. This is not a loss. The battlefield had fallen eerily silent. Li Xiaowei stood with halberd in hand, his gaze fixed on Guan Gongxiao as the wound on his forehead slowly knitted shut. Li Chenghui and Qi Juyan stood to either side. Guan Gongxiao hesitated briefly, feeling a sudden weight press down on him, and spoke, "Fellow Taoist, your skill is impressive." Leaving those words behind, he summoned his water arts and departed. The 3 Dharma artifacts still suppressed beneath the gleaming watchtower were beyond saving. He could only abandon them with a heavy heart. Li Xiaowei watched him go, the wound on his forehead now so small it was barely visible. Guan Gongxiao departed in disarray, the silence around him broken only by the rising wind. No one dared speak. It was not until he reached the depths of his own territory that Guan Lingdi approached to comfort him softly. She said gently, "Li Xiaowei is a man like Chelong Jian or Gu Shentong, one favored by heaven and granted every unfair advantage. Only divine abilities can match such men. Brother, you must not dwell on it. I understand." Though humiliated and defeated, Guan Gongxiao did not lose heart and simply replied, "There are those who will deal with him. We need only do our best." Chapter 1097, a scene of ruin, floating South Territory. Golden mist filled the skies and true fire flowed like a river. Li Minggong raised the 6-cornered scarlet flame lamp high in her hand, its flames roaring skyward and holding back the surging golden mist. On the other side, the Chongming Profound Insight screen radiated with dazzling light, its cascading azure glow capturing streaks of golden brilliance. The great battle in the floating South Territory had already reached its final stage. Sidu Mo hovered high in the sky, his diamond-patterned golden feathered robe billowing as he gripped Ding Weizeng's long staff with all his strength. Streams of golden qi flowed down his cheeks, making him look terrifying. On the other hand, Ding Weizeng was in even more miserable shape. His Dharma body was covered in wounds from head to toe, as dark red blood stained his robes, and a massive gash split open his abdomen, revealing glistening internal organs glowing faintly with Dharma light. Sidu Mo stared at him with a dark expression, his gaze drifting from side to side. That wretched, foul-mouthed hooked serpent was still lurking nearby, its whereabouts unknown. Time is running out. Sidu Mo had not fallen short of his fearsome reputation. His techniques had even surpassed the Li family's expectations. The Golden Tang Gate Master had single-handedly held off both Ding Weizeng and the hooked serpent, one man and one beast, and pressed them so hard that Ding Weizeng's injuries grew worse and worse. On top of that, the Chongming Profound Insight screen hung in the sky, perfectly countering flying swords and flying needles. Although Ding Weizeng had already suffered injuries earlier when he fought 6 opponents alone, his performance was still astounding. Li Wuxiao, too, was no ordinary foe. The 2 venomous hooks on his tail were enough to make most cultivators shudder. It was precisely those 2 venomous hooks that made things dangerous. Caught off guard earlier, Sidu Mo had only been grazed on the chin, yet the biting cold had spread from his jaw all the way to his chest. Even swallowing several pills had only temporarily suppressed it. One of his own foolish subordinates, unaware of how deadly the hooked serpent was, had been struck once by a hook and nearly plummeted to the ground. Use your head for once. The Li family is a Purple Mansion realm immortal family. Do you think they'd bother with an ordinary hooked serpent from the seabed? White ones are decent, but black ones are pathetic in battle. Even dragons find them unappetizing. If the Li family values this black serpent, then it must be something extraordinary. Having spent many years in the Eastern Sea, Sidu Mo knew these things well. Thus, he dared not allow himself to be struck again, but that caution restrained his movements in battle. His most prized spell arts were countered, leaving him in a difficult position of being unable to advance or retreat. As for the other members of Golden Tang Gate, Sidu Bairo was locked in combat with Li Minggong. Though he had driven her back again and again, he was forced to fight cautiously due to Li Wuxiao's intermittent support. The White Ape and Li Chenghui were each engaged with their own opponents. However, it was the Dawn Rayfish who proved especially formidable. He darted back and forth, holding off 3 opponents at once with remarkable speed and strength. His attacks might not be lethal, but they were swift and vicious. He had also likely learned his high-level spell arts from Li Zijie. He could conjure phantom clones, filling the sky with illusory afterimages and making it difficult to discern the real from the false. As the battle dragged on, Sidu Mo still saw no reinforcements from the capital Immortal Dao. His heart grew uneasy, and he craned his neck in anxious hope. At last, several streaks of light rose from the east. Foundation Establishment Realm reinforcements from the hidden East Territory had arrived. They were led by a round-faced woman. Li Minggong looked closely and saw that it was Song Yunbai. A chill crept into her heart. This is trouble. Her own forces were already stretched to the limit, just holding off Golden Tang Gate. Below, a guest cultivator poisoned by the serpent was still wreaking havoc and looting everything, making the situation even more desperate. If more enemies arrived, they might have no choice but to retreat. When the woman drew near, Situ Mo recognized her as well. He was always respectful toward the capital Immortal Dao and politely deferential toward the Li family, but he spoke in a low, heavy voice to Song Yunbai. "You girl, what took you so long to come from the hidden East Territory?" "What took me so long?" Song Yunbai was not the least bit intimidated and replied in a mocking tone. "It's not as if I can just march straight in like the Gate Master." Li Chenghui dismantled the grand formation of Hongfu Mountain, and the entire mountain is crawling with rogue cultivators and esteemed clans. Hongfu Mountain was personally entrusted to us by the Taoist master to guard, and we cannot afford to neglect it. She came closer with a smile, then added, "If the Gate Master has any complaints, then perhaps your gate's Purple Mansion Realm Taoist master should take it up directly with ours." It was no secret that Golden Tang Gate's Purple Mansion Realm Taoist master was wandering abroad. Song Yunbai's words were impeccably polite and offered no fault to seize upon, yet their meaning was grating. Situ Mo's face darkened, but now was no time to explode, so he could only say, "Then why haven't you come to reinforce us?" Song Yunbai simply bowed and replied, "You misunderstand, Gate Master. Our young master crushed a secret talisman and has already withdrawn into the wilderness. I came only to deliver the news." The moment those words left her mouth, the morale of the Li family surged. Song Yunbai flicked her sleeves, ignoring Situ Mo's sour expression, and moved to cover the retreat before preparing to depart. Situ Mo swallowed his anger and said in a deep voice, "Withdraw." He immediately withdrew his spell art, dodging a pair of hooks that suddenly shot out, and retreated swiftly. Since nearly everyone on the field was wounded, none dared to give chase. After all, Li Minggong had been battered back and forth by both Situ Mo and Situ Bio. She had taken her pills and exhausted her trump cards. If either the Chongming Profound Insight Screen or the six-cornered Scarlet Flame Lamp had faltered even slightly, she would already have perished in true fire. Pursuit was out of the question. Ding Weizhang was the most severely wounded, but thanks to the protection of his Dharma body, he still seemed in tolerable condition. The White Ape and Dawn Rayfish had sustained minor injuries, while Li Wushao had fought with stealth and cunning. Though he had played a significant role, he escaped with only a few cuts. Li Chenghui lacked significant dueling prowess and had faced a mid-stage Foundation Establishment Realm opponent. Yet with the Upper Feather Night Robe and Night Ghost secret talisman gifted by his parents, his foe could not even touch him, while the Night Ghost left the enemy reeling. As a result, he was in the best condition of all, having lost hardly any mana. Li Minggong finally let out a breath and nearly collapsed. She beckoned Li Chenghui over to handle matters and murmured, "They captured Elder Siwei under my watch. I have no face left to see the old master." Li Chenghui soothed her with a few words and had the White Ape support her back. Flames roared and black smoke billowed all around. The floating South Territory, which had only just begun to recover, was once again left in ruins, with most of its mountain formations shattered and devastated. Chapter 1098, The News from Jingyi I, Wilderness. As the fierce battle came to an end, Li Xiaowei took stock of his severe injuries. After taking some medicine, he waved his hand lightly, and the gate in the sky vanished into flowing light and returned to him. 3 streaks of radiance immediately shot up from below, attempting to flee in haste. Yet if they had not fled in the midst of the battle, how could they possibly escape now that they had fallen into the Li family's hands? Several people surrounded the 3 Dharma artifacts and delivered them into Li Xiaowei's hands. Li Xiaowei merely put them away first, then descended in a beam of light, enduring the pain. The Li family's foothold in the wilderness was shallow, with few established stations, while the Kong family had cultivated the region for over a century. As the wilderness's spiritual energy surged in the past decade, their control deepened even further, so they had built many palaces. They landed at the nearest one. Li Chenghui approached with evident concern as Li Xiaowei exhaled and asked, "How are everyone's injuries?" The battle had been utter chaos, and unless someone had fallen, no one could pay constant attention to any particular spot. Li Chenghui had only been able to briefly scan earlier and gave a simple reply. Only Ma Shui and Li Wen were injured. Everyone on the field bore wounds, but if he used the word injured, it meant they were hurt to the point of being unable to move. Li Xiaowei still felt as though he might vomit blood and spoke urgently. Profound Peak Gate has pristine water springs echo, and wood virtue grave verdant. Send for them to treat the wounded. Li Chenghui helped him into the palace hall and nodded. "I'll go at once." The Springs Echo guest cultivator Bai has been killed, but Sun, the Grave Verdant Grove guest cultivator, is in better shape. I'll have him come." Li Chenghui hurried off. Li Xiaowei gritted his teeth and swallowed back the blood as he forced himself to remain seated on the main seat for 15 minutes. Only then did his vision, which had been swimming with golden stars, slowly return to normal. He exhaled a plume of white mist as he finally suppressed his turbulent blood and restored the color to his temples. Now his weakness was no longer obvious. The white mist spread out, filling the entire hall with the scent of peonies. A group led by Li Chenghui entered from below to report. Li Chenghui bore no injuries, having merely expended a profound thunder talisman. Behind him, Cui Juyin stood with lowered eyes in respectful silence, having spent only a bit of his mana. Gbuzhai had lost an arm and looked rather dispirited, though it was nothing serious. The old man lacked combat ability but was quite skilled at preserving his life. His concealed containment palace was unusual as well. Even with a broken arm, he could patch it with a few bones and recover after some rest. As for Maya Ashui, who was not present, she had suffered grievous injuries. She was struck into 3 pieces and hurled down the mountain near the end of the battle. Gbuzhai had retrieved her body and sustained her life with Wanglin Blossom. Had he been a moment later, this cultivator from Jiangbei would have perished in the wilderness. Although Maya Ashui was a surrendered general from Hidden Cloud Cave, perhaps intending to atone for her past or to prove her loyalty, she had fought well in the battle, nearly sacrificing her life. Li Xiaowei naturally had to inquire and said, "See that she is cared for. I will ask the Taoist master to save her." As for Li Wen, whose immortal foundation was the court guard, though his rank was not high, he still had a Dharma body. He had only lost 4 fingers and shattered much of his bones, rendering him immobile, but his life was not in danger. After hearing the full report of his cultivator's injuries, Li Xiaowei felt his heart settle somewhat. After all, Profound Peak Gate had been the main force in the clash with the capital Immortal Dao. Moreover, whether willing or not, Profound Peak Gate's guest cultivators had been placed to shield his own people, so their losses were not severe. But nearly all major casualties are on the Profound Peak Gate's side. My family had gone all out, yet the Profound Peak Gate's guest cultivators had been positioned to block with their lives. From a rough glance just now, this battle alone cost Profound Peak Gate nearly 10 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators, not just these guest cultivators. Even the direct descendants of Profound Peak Gate must be deeply shaken right now. It was no easy feat to achieve the Foundation Establishment Realm. No matter where they went, such cultivators were at least regarded with respect, if not treated as honored guests. How could anyone willingly die in such numbers after a single battle? The Profound Peak Gate name was not a magic charm. How many would truly be willing to charge through fire and water for it? The fact that these people had not scattered from the very beginning was almost entirely due to the pressure from their own Purple Mansion Realm cultivator. He understood this clearly and deliberately turned to question the Profound Peak Gate. The Profound Peak Gate cultivator wore coarse robes. Guest cultivator Sun, who cultivated Grave Verdant Grove, looked aged and desolate as he answered. To answer the family head, we lost 2 early-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators, 1 mid-stage cultivator, and 1 early-stage direct descendant was crippled. We did kill 1 mid-stage elder and 1 early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator from the capital Immortal Dao, and he seemed reluctant to speak and after a pause continued, 2 of our consecrated ones were captured, and 1 of them surrendered before even leaving the territory. It was, after all, a shameful matter, and the remaining one would surely surrender as well. Guest cultivator Sun quickly fell silent, and Li Chenghui spoke up. At present, the remaining direct disciples are Kong Qiuyan and Kong Xiaoxiang at early Foundation Establishment Realm, Kong Gili at mid-stage, and Kong Guxi, the Gate Master, at late stage. Among the guest cultivators, there is Sun Bai, a mid-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator, and Fu Yuezi at late stage. The other 2 guest cultivators are all lying on the ground. Li Xiaowei noted that these were all from the Kong family but saw no sign of Kong Guxi. The Profound Peak Gate Master had fought the hardest, so he was likely barely clinging to life. He asked directly, "How much of Shanji Prefecture has been held?" Sun Bai froze for a moment, then replied softly, "About 60% has been preserved. Only the 27 towns near the southern border remain. Several mountains have been lost and the market city has been lost, but the mountain gate remains intact. The young master is cultivating within the mountain gate and is unharmed." This young master naturally referred to Li Jianglong. After Changxi's death, the people of Profound Peak Gate were eager for Li Jianglong to return safely to the Li family and would not dare mistreat him. Li Xiaowei paid it no mind and sighed inwardly. If no outside force intervenes, it will be difficult even to hold on to our current territory in the wilderness, let alone control Shanji Prefecture. It would have been better to yield it to the Purple Smoke Gate earlier and gain some assistance. Their Taoist master had yet to send word, and Li Xiaowei dared not act rashly. He dismissed the crowd and waited for a while. At last, news he had been longing for arrived from the west, and the figure of the white ape appeared before the hall. He hurried forward to meet him and asked, "How is the floating south?" The white ape reported everything in detail. Li Xiaowei exhaled slowly, but when he heard that Nsiwei had been captured, he froze briefly before speaking in a deep voice. "Send someone immediately with Sidu Ku to try and exchange him for Elder Nsiwei. If the capital Immortal Dao takes him away, it will no longer be the same matter." If the Li family used Sidu Ku to exchange for Nsiwei, Sidu Mo would surely agree wholeheartedly. But if Nsiwei was taken away by Guan Gongxiao's people, things would change completely. Guan Gongxiao would not even glance at Sidu Ku. The white ape immediately cupped his fists and withdrew. Though Nsiwei's strength was not exceptional, his loyalty was unwavering and his contributions significant. Li Xiaowei was unwilling to see anything happen to him. He paced back and forth in the hall. He felt that the chances of success were slim. Moreover, Li Ziming was still entangled with Taoist Master Yi Hui in the Great Void, making Nsiwei's chance of returning to the lake pitifully small. He pondered, Guan Gongxiao is no fool. Though Elder Nsiwei's strength is lacking, as one of my family's elders, how could he not know his value? He will surely demand him from Sidu Mo's side, and Sidu Mo will have no reason to refuse. Chapter 1099, The News from Jingyi II, Riverbank. After a fierce battle came to a halt, spiritual energy still rippled through the sky, and the plants on the ground drooped and withered. Cultivators were stationed at several points to tend to the spirit veins damaged by true fire or Zheng metal. The scene was bustling amidst the ruins. Though both sides desired the wilderness, and thus strove to fight in the air rather than on the ground, considerable damage had still been done during the battle. Fortunately, Guan Can had died at the source of the land's veins, causing the water vein to surge with vitality, so the loss of spiritual energy was not too great. Kong Guxi descended from the air and lifted his Dharma robe. His 2 legs looked as though they had been gnawed by dogs, missing chunks here and there, exposing translucent flesh and pale white cartilage. The capital Immortal Dao's Dharma artifacts are formidable. These wounds will be difficult to heal. His mana was nearly exhausted, leaving him unable to heal, and the wounds were further complicated by residual mana. He quickly swallowed 2 pills, hastily covered his legs again with the robe, and spoke to the Profound Peak Gate disciple approaching to greet him. The Peak Masters have all suffered serious injuries. I saw that Guest Cultivator Sun and Guest Cultivator Wu seemed in better condition. Where have they gone? The disciple hesitated twice before replying to the Gate Master. The 2 have gone to Lord Chenghui's hall to report. Kong Guxi paused for a moment, then quickly nodded. Good, I was too slow. I shall go there at once. He looked around and saw not a single guest cultivator in sight. Only his family member, Kong Qiuyan, was tending to their disciples within the formation. Most of the Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators had fallen, and those still standing had gone ahead to receive the Li family's people. When he looked more closely, he found that even the disciples dispatched from their own gate were few, with no more than a handful scattered about. A dozen or so lay groaning on the ground. He could not help but ask, the disciples of the 17th peak, why are there only a few of them left? There had been little involvement of Qi cultivation realm, or embryonic breathing realm cultivators, in this war between the 2 sides. Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators fought in the skies, while the Profound Peak Gate disciples on the ground mainly faced esteemed families crossing the river, who were hardly formidable opponents. Although the enemy had more Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators and many accidental deaths had occurred, the losses should not have been this severe. The disciple paused, uncertain how to explain. A disciple like him could sense some things, but the lofty Gate Master might not. He quietly replied to answer the Gate Master. The brothers fought along the river, retreating as they fought. Perhaps they flew a little farther along the way and lost their way. If we wait a while longer, they should return. Lost their way. Although Kong Guxi had not been in charge for long, he was no fool. When he heard those words and saw the disciple's expression, he suddenly understood. Pressing his lips together, he spoke bitterly. Oh, let them go then. Perhaps it is for the best. The profound Peak Gate was not a gate that had sprung from nothing. Most of its disciples came from the esteemed families of Lake Xi'an and Shanji Prefecture. If those places fell into enemy hands and they could not even protect their own families, then their disciples leaving on the wind was only natural. Though Kong Guxi felt bitter sorrow, he still understood in his heart, when Shanji is completely lost, more will leave. Enduring the pain, Kong Guxi took to the air. A man clad in ochre armor with a dark patterned face mask, wielding a spear and an axe, his body covered in blood, flew down. He descended before Kong Guxi and rasped, "Fu Yuezi has just tended to his wounds and has come at once to pay respects to the gate master." Fu Yuezi had just fought 4 opponents alone and had 2 shattered ribs that were exposed to the Kong Guxi quickly helped him up, covering his own shoulder as he pushed him forward a step and said, "Go see Lord Chenghui. Why waste time coming to see me?" Fu Yuezi refused to move. Kong Guxi, too injured to push him, sighed and stepped back. At that moment an elderly man hurried up to him and halted hesitantly. His hair was disheveled, his crown askew, his appearance wretched, and his eyes bloodshot. Kong Guxi felt as if an ice pit had cracked open in his chest at the sight, chilling him to the soles of his feet. The back of his left heel, already sliced away, throbbed with hollow pain as he asked, "Old brother, what is the meaning of this?" This elder was the very one Kong Guxi had sent to Jingyi Mountain early on. After Changxi's death, he had crushed the jade pendant he carried to summon aid. Now he had returned in disgrace. The old man fell to his knees with a thud, crying and lamenting as he answered. The people stationed in the market at Jingyi Mountain said that Taoist master Xuanyi was not in the mountain. And those disciples were so haughty they would not even lower their heads to look at me. I then asked about 17th brother, but they said he refused to meet me. The family sent 8 letters before, and he never replied to even one. Now, I went to Yuzhu Island and was driven out. What? Kong Guxi felt his breath leave his lungs, leaving him momentarily dazed. It took several breaths before he recovered as he asked in disbelief, "Did he not request provisions from the gate just a year ago?" "Yes," replied the elder. Kong Guxi understood now and nearly collapsed. The man who had not shed a single tear even while fighting, covered in blood and flesh, now broke down crying, choking out 2 sobs before swallowing them back like a strangled rooster. "Alas, it's over now. How am I to explain this to Taoist Master Zheijing?" He wiped his tears. With both his own younger brother and Taoist Master Xuanyi proving unreliable, Kong Guxi feared the Li family might reconsider their alliance, and if that happened, his own ruin would be absolute. Beside him, Kong Qiuyan was equally uneasy. Glancing at her gate master, she asked helplessly, "What else can we do? He has reached the shore and refuses to set foot on a sinking boat." A heavy silence fell as they looked at one another. Kong Guxi's elder brother's expression was bleak. He glanced around and asked, "Where are they?" The 3 words struck them like a heavy hammer. The elder read their faces and understood, his body going limp as if his bones had been drawn out. He asked, "With profound Peak Gate's allies merely watching and Jingyi Mountain shutting us out, our family is in dire straits. It would be better to abandon the gate early and seek refuge on the sea. At least then there might be a chance at survival." Kong Qiuyan closed her eyes silently and replied, "Who would follow you to such a forsaken place? Sun Bai, which guest cultivator would? How many Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators could you possibly support on some random island?" Beside them, Fu Yuezi fell to his knees with a thud, choking with emotion as he said, "No matter where the gate master goes, I will follow unto death without hesitation." Kong Guxi was horrified by what he heard, his soul scattering in fear as he shouted, "What nonsense are you spouting? We follow only the Taoist master's orders. Where do you 2 get the courage to speak out of turn? Leave the mainland." Leaving was unthinkable. The profound Peak Gate was too important, and there were still elders within striving for breakthroughs. Even if the gate were to fall, Kong Guxi would not dare harbor even a thought of departure. One would have to be mad to do so. What are they trying to do? This would be a slap in the Li family's face. And if that happens, where in this vast world would we still find a place to exist? The chill crawling up his spine snapped him out of his grief and rage. His face flushed red as he shouted loudly, "Remember this well. Even if we die, the Kong family will die in Jiangnan. We will die fighting the capital Immortal Tao. As long as the Taoist master permits it, even if there is but one patch of land left in Jiangnan, as long as we can raise our heads and see the Spirit Mountain in the north, we will go nowhere else. If elder brother dares speak such words again, do not blame me for showing no mercy with my sword." Chapter 1100, First Encounter I. Kong Guxi's words made several members of the Kong family lower their heads. Kong Qiuyan answered softly, regret clouding her face as she shook her head. My uncle meant no harm. I beg the gate master's forgiveness. If our uncles had not been slain by Chengxiao Gate at sea, we would not have fallen into such hardship. Forgive us for troubling you. Before Kong Guxi could reply, a streak of purple lightning raced through the sky and landed before them, transforming into a silver-armored man. Kong Guxi hurried forward, cupping his hands respectfully and said, Brother Chenghui, I suffered some injuries and was occupied reorganizing the disciples, so I did not have time to come and pay my respects. Gate Master Kong, there is no need for such formality. Li Chenghui quickly helped him up. Kong Guxi's generation was actually that of Li Ziming's, far senior to his own, so he could not possibly accept a bow from him. He composed himself and said solemnly, My family's head requests your audience. Kong Guxi indeed did not bow again. He rose at once and followed Li Chenghui closely. Li Chenghui knew that Profound Peak Gate had suffered heavy losses and offered words of comfort. I heard several guest cultivators were injured, most while shielding our people. I offer you my gratitude on their behalf. Ah, it was only what ought to be done. Pain made Kong Guxi's legs tremble, but he suppressed it with his mana and replied with utmost courtesy. The Profound Peak Gate Dao lineage would no longer exist without Moongaze. Brother Chenghui, you are too polite. Although guest cultivator Bai of Springs Echo has fallen, Sun Bai, who is even more skilled in healing, still lives. These injuries are not a major concern. When the two entered the main hall, Li Xiaowei sat at the head, questioning Sun Bai in detail about the cultivator's injuries. When he saw Kong Guxi approach, Sun Bai immediately stepped aside. The old man knew his place and quietly withdrew. Sun Bai was a guest cultivator of Profound Peak Gate. Strictly speaking, bypassing Kong Guxi to speak directly with Li Xiaowei was improper, but people followed strength, and now only Fu Yuezi refrained from crowding around the Li family. However, Kong Guxi paid it no mind. He too had once been proud and arrogant in his youth, a wastrel who understood well the source of swagger. Without the backing of a purple mansion realm, he was now nothing more than a dog picking up scraps beneath the table. Even so, he stepped forward reverently and bowed deeply. Greetings, family head. Elder, please, you mustn't. Li Xiaowei offered polite words, and attendants immediately moved to help Kong Guxi up. Yet Kong Guxi stubbornly completed his bow and said respectfully, the family head turned the tide and saved the Profound Peak Gate Dao lineage. Such deeds deserve my deepest bow. He offered bows and thanks again and again, performing the full set of formal rites. Li Xiaowei waited patiently for him to finish, exchanged a few polite refusals, then cut straight to the heart of the matter and asked, How does the elder intend to arrange your people now? When Li Xiaowei asked this, Kong Guxi naturally could not reply with anything like, We shall return to Profound Peak Gate. He knew that much of Shanji Prefecture had already been lost. If his group returned to the Profound Peak Gate, the Purple Mansion Realm's grand formation would indeed keep them safe, but what of the wilderness? Should they leave it all for the Li family to defend alone? The master of Profound Peak Gate immediately dropped to his knees, fear and timidity written across his face. Family head, the checkpoints of Shanji Prefecture have fallen, and danger looms on all four borders. Travel will likely be intercepted by Guan Gongxiao. I beg the family head to grant us a place, so that we may first station ourselves in the wilderness. Once the situation eases, we will then return to Profound Peak Gate. When he finished speaking, silence fell over the hall. Sun Bai, waiting outside, could not help but turn his head, guilt rising within him. Even Li Xiaowei glanced at him for a moment. Whether Shanji Prefecture could even be held aside, Li Xiaowei had always planned to place the Profound Peak Gate's foundation establishment realm cultivators and disciples in the wilderness. The Li family members had their own posts, and even then manpower was insufficient. There was no way Kong Guxi and his people could return to their gate to cultivate and heal, for if they did, who would guard the wilderness? Li Xiaowei had never even considered allowing Kong Guxi and his people into the mainland. The Li family had no intention of annexing Profound Peak Gate. Its name still had its uses. He had not even thought about recruiting Profound Peak Gate's few guest cultivators. Only this Sun Bai may prove useful. After all, he is of the grave Verdant Grove, which is most skilled in the arts of healing. I had intended to seek out Springs Echo before, but this Wood Virtue Dao Foundation is far superior to that half-drained Springs Echo. Li Xiaowei weighed his thoughts silently, then nodded slightly and spoke. Gate Master Kong is too polite. The wilderness is already the domain of your esteemed family, so why speak of making room? I too worry that Profound Peak Gate is far off by Lake Xian. Not only is travel inconvenient, but support would be difficult to send. Since Patriarch Kong shares my thoughts, please select a fine mountain range here in the wilderness to serve as your foothold. Kong Guxi nodded quickly. He had planned to move part of the gate's treasures out, in case the situation deteriorated beyond recovery. Even if the gate were lost, Profound Peak Gate would still have hope. He waited with an anxious heart for a moment before finally hearing Li Xiaowei ask, "Has there been any news regarding Jingyi Mountain?" Kong Guxi dropped to his knees with a thud and bowed his head as he spoke. Li Xiaowei listened with furrowed brows, and only after hearing him out did his expression ease slightly as he shook his head. "Gate Master, your family's people, truly refused to meet." He fixed his eyes firmly on Kong Guxi, watching as the latter nodded, a mixture of sorrow and fear in his eyes. There was no trace of pretense. The Gate Master then handed over a letter written by his brother. Li Xiaowei read it and advised, "Overseas sects cannot be trusted. Having left the family since youth, it is hard to expect them to side with the Kongs. Let it be." As he dismissed Kong Guxi, he offered a careful reminder, "However, my word alone is not final in this matter. You must seek out the Taoist master. Once he returns, I will send someone to you." The relief Kong Guxi had begun to feel vanished halfway. He sighed and withdrew to seek Sun Bai for treatment. Li Chenghui escorted him out, then stepped back into the hall and said thoughtfully, "Taoist Master Changxi chose well. Kong Guxi may lack in schemes and strategies, but he has the rare ability to see clearly, let go quickly, and bow his head when needed. Those few traits alone are enough to save Profound Peak Gate." Li Xiaowei nodded in agreement. He may lack strategic talent and be mediocre in ordinary times, yet he is a pillar in moments of crisis and a fine steed in times of decline. To see clearly and swallow his pride. You say it is merely these two traits, but how many can truly do so? When collapse comes, life and death hinge on only a few steps, and how many can reach that far? Li Chenghui agreed with the praise but voiced his concern. Only, with the Taoist master still absent and Jingyi Mountain's situation shifting again and again, the path ahead grows ever harder. Li Xiaowei neither confirmed nor denied matters, only saying, "At worst, we can yield both Shanji Prefecture and Profound Peak Gate. We will not walk away empty-handed. Those charging at the front are still Profound Peak Gate's cultivators. Setting aside the capital Immortal Tao that we have long since offended, as long as our family is careful, this matter will remain a sure profit. But we cannot surrender Shanji Prefecture or the Profound Peak Gate right away. After all, our family has yet to even set foot in them. To abandon them too quickly would harm our reputation. Holding one step and retreating one step is still better than never having taken anything at all." In truth, the Li family had suffered almost no substantial losses apart from Insiwei in this great battle. A few minor territorial gains and some injuries were all there was, and with a Purple Mansion realm cultivator, none of it mattered as long as their people remained alive. Li Xiaowei paused for a moment, troubled by Insiwei's situation, then glanced at the letter from Jingyi Mountain. He pondered briefly and said, "You say Jingyi Mountain is wavering, but I think not.